Discussing DC. That was literally what it took me like an hour to make that shitty intro. But hopefully it gets better as if this goes along well. But yeah, I made an intro because Matt Wyatt was like first episode, and I was thinking, first episode. I thought it was just gonna be a one topic. Okay, but I was like, well, if that's the case, then watch this intro made. I made an intro. And literally, it took me only an hour. Well, to be fair, 30 minutes, but still. Yeah. Today on the panel, we are here to discuss everything DC. This is discussing DC. Well, we're going to go through the topics of we're going to start out what led to James Gunn and Peter Safran taking over DC. We're going to We're going to talk about Zack Snyder. We're going to talk about James Gunn. We're going to talk about Michael Ursulin. We're going to talk about the Schumacher. We're going to talk about every single thing DC. What caused Jeff Johns, Peter Jeff, everything. We're going to talk about all this today on the topic of the state of DC. But before we get started, I want to introduce my co-host, my three amigos, my three stooges of the bunch. I want to introduce Mo first off. Ryan Cam 20. How you doing, Mo?
What's the matter with you? No, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Next up is Curly himself. How you doing, Curly?
He's a victim of circumstance. Or no. Wait, let me do the voice. I'm a victim of circumstance.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into DC. I mean, it's something that we've been talking about for a while, and we always want to talk about everything that's going on in the world of DC from past, present, and future. So yeah, I'm really excited for this first video.
All right, and next up is the final host is the guy who literally is Larry of the bunch. Well, I just want to say thank you all for being here. We are here to discuss topics. And first off, with our first topic, we are going to discuss the state of DC. We're going to address every single thing. We're going to talk about in the state of DC discussion. We're going to talk about every single thing DC related right now. But first, we're going to discuss what led to the start. Who was the first before? Because before DC was in fact under the supervision of James Gunn and Peter Safran, it was just executives ran it basically. Whereas you had people Warner Brothers who actually John Peters at first was in charge of the Tim Burton at Batman 89 was in charge of oversaw Batman 89. And then of course Batman Returns, Tim Burton kind of pushed him out because he goes, I want full creative control or else I'm going to do The Nightmare Before Christmas. And so that's kind of what happened with John Peters. He kind of got they told him fuck off. And so John Peters then said, okay, watch this. And then they went and bought all the Superman rights up. So that was kind of funny to John Peters because then in the 90s, whenever they went to go make another Superman movie, John Peters was like, hey, guess what? You want to make another Superman movie? Well, guess what, motherfucker? Guess who owns the rights? And they're like, we do. And they're like, check again. And they're like, oh, you own the rights. And it was really, really, really funny. And I thought that was really funny because he basically said, oh, fuck you to Warner Brothers. Like, hey, you want to make a Superman movie? I got to get first approval. Just like with Batman, that he was a hands-on producer of Batman. In fact, he was actually banging Kim Basinger at the time. That's how she's in the movie because it was originally in Batman 89, it was Sean Young, who was the love interest, was Vicky Vale. But then they had she got into a horse accident during one of the shoots of the movie with Michael Keaton. And so she fractured her leg. And so they had, instead of hey, look, we're going over budget. So we got two options. We can delay the movie, which will probably cancel the film, or we can recast her. And they decided, fuck you, Sean Young. And then they brought in, and then John Peters is like, hey, I'm banging this chick, Kim Basinger. She just did a movie called 9.5 Weeks. Y'all want to, I think she would be a good choice for Vicky Vale. And they're like, well, let's do a chemistry reel with Michael Keaton. And then she did. I'm like, all right, that's fine. She didn't even have it. All of her outfits and everything was meant for Sean Young. She literally just came on set the next day and was like, all right, I'm Vicky Vale now. And so it's that's kind of odd. But yeah. So what are your thoughts, though, on, all right, we're here to talk about DC. What are your thoughts on the start of DC? The real start of it is during the Paul Levitz era. He was the guy who was the charge of DC. He was in charge, I think, from Batman 89 up to I think Superman Returns.
So, Superman Returns came out in '06. When
Yes.
did you say he got started?
About 88, 89. Like he was in charge of DC at that time. He oversaw anything DC from Batman the animated series, all Batman and Robin, Batman. You know, he was the one who made the rule that kind of is like the unofficial rule of DC. If you have a character that's in a movie, they cannot appear in any other format besides the comics.
Well, I think the Levitz era is really the agony and the ecstasy, if you really think about it, because the agony of like the really bad stuff in the Schumacher films and Superman 4 Quest for Peace, but then you have the ecstasy of Batman Returns, Superman 1 and 2, and you also a little bit of agony there with the Tim Burton Superman Lives, I think it was called, the Nick Cage one that never saw the light of day until The Flash, but we'll talk about that, I imagine, when we get to there. So this era is definitely the best of times and the worst of times, and I think in other eras there are more pronounced periods of success and failure, but it's very much a wave of success, failure, success, failure, success, failure. But it's the era that really set the standard, and it's the one that most people remember.
Let's not forget. Yeah. What were you gonna say, Matt? Ryan?
Oh yeah, well, what I wanted to chime in for the Paul Levitz era to correct from what Ryan was saying about the Superman, like he didn't take over DC until what you said until like around 88 or 89. So this was like during post Superman, The Quest for Peace. So he was not in charge at the time when that film came out. So yeah, it was still getting into the modern day of the golden era of the DC, where they had to do something, because after the fallout for Superman, The Quest for Peace had a major backlash, box office flop. They thought they were never going to recover until they had to do the Batman 89 to make it more dark and gritty. And it really just became a commercial success. They wanted to get Steven Seagal to play Batman at the time before Michael Keaton, and because they wanted to add an action hero. Because it was during a time when big action heroes like Steven Seagal, Schwarzenegger, they were the big hits of the name at the time. And they were like, no, we wanted to get someone who was more human and more relatable. So we wanted to get Michael Keaton. And he was coming off of Beetlejuice, of a Tim Burton's Batman movie. And he was coming off a lot of the comedic roles like Mr. Mom. They never thought they would take him seriously to play Batman until they had to do the costume test to see him in the Batman outfit. They're like, oh my God, this is Batman. I mean, if this was like during social media era, a lot of people would say, oh yeah, this is not the best choice to play Batman. Like, he does not come off of the look of the character. He doesn't look scary. It would have been a different time, but they were able to pull it off, and it blew up out of nowhere. And this was their next best thing. This is when Batman became the crown jewel at Warner Brothers, and they made it clear that you can never have him in a live action television show. You can't. Because, yeah, sure, you were able to pull it off of the Adam West Batman back in the day, but then when they put him on the silver screen and he became a big hit, there was no way that they were going to put him in a live action television show other than animation. That was the only time that you can put him in the show. And yeah, like you said, like it has its upsides and it has its downsides, like the Schumacher era, how much that almost destroyed the comic book genre. And then we had the television show like Smallville, like we talked about that on the Small Talk podcast, and it was during the time when we didn't have many superhero movies. Marvel wasn't really hitting it at the time until the early 2000s and maybe in the late 90s for Blade. But yeah, and then Superman Returns came out in 06, and we can all agree it wasn't the best. It didn't live up to everybody's hype. And then in the mid 2000s, we were in the Nolan era for the Batman Begins, and that's when it revitalized the Batman franchise. And yeah, so yeah, like I said, has its hit and miss. But I appreciate it back in the day because we had a great animated shows like Batman, Superman, Justice League. Those were like incredible hits at the time in the 90s and early 2000s.
So I cannot imagine Steven Seagal playing Batman for a variety of reasons, but it would be just awkward if like that alternate universe, if he had gotten cast and the Flash came around and be like, hey, Mr. Seagal, can we borrow you for our big Flash movie? He's like, I need to see if Vladimir will let me out.
Yes, I like, hey, what's up, Barry? You want to go fight some guys?
Not to mention nowadays he looks like a bearded beach ball. So like that would
Everything
not
he's
have-
doing now is very questionable in today's world.
Honestly, he's more relevant because of JonTron than anything else. I hope someone out
I
there.
mean, I wasn't even the biggest Steven Seagal fan anyway. I was not the biggest fan of him.
I don't think anyone was, but I
No, I think back in the day they used to really enjoy his movies. It was back in
Okay.
the 80s and 90s where he was on top at the time as an action star.
I don't know. I've seen Fire Down Below, and I've seen like Death Underground, or his one environmental movie where he goes after Michael Caine doing a strange Texan accent. I don't see the appeal.
I mean,
like
but it was a product of its time. That's all I'm saying is that it was just a product of its time. People enjoy the campy, cheesy action films.
like Schwarzenegger, get it, love it. Stallone, get it,
Well,
love it.
Stallone and Schwarzenegger, they were the prime. They were more prime than Steven Seagal.
Oh yeah, sure, but like I'm surprised like Seagal didn't get cast in like an Expendables movie. I'm glad he didn't, but
Thank God.
I'm
just when you
glad.
thought that he would get every like old school veteran action stars into cast in the Expendables, he was practically getting everyone in that movie.
Okay,
Just
so
left it
all right,
on.
so correction. It was not Paul Levitz because Paul Levitz did not take over. I misfiled my documents. It was
You see
Paul
what you
Levitz.
just did? You see what you just did? It was
Paul Levitz didn't take over until 2002 of DC. It was John Peters and then Lorenzo de Bonaventura. So basically, John Peters was in charge because nobody really was in charge of DC Comics at the time. It was
yeah,
most-
because they didn't really have a DC studio. It was just Warner Brothers. It didn't start doing
really John Peters is the one.
It didn't start the DC studios didn't start until James Gunn took over, and then they started to have their own studios,
Yeah.
kind of like what Paramount did with Kevin Feige when they started the first Iron Man. They started building their own studio for Marvel.
There was one person though that was but after Batman, there was one person that was in charge of Warner Brothers who literally is the reason why we had Schumacher's Batman. In fact, it was a movie where he told this man right here had told Schumacher, make Batman and Robin more toyetic.
Yeah,
Which is
it was
really-
commercially. It was made to be a commercial film. It was not made to be a quality. It was made to sell toys, appeal to younger audience. And yeah, back in the day for me, when I watched Batman and Robin, I used to love it back then. I was a little kid. I didn't develop a brain until I watched it back then as an adult. Like, oh God, what the hell was I smoking? But it's one of those movies that it was strictly more for kids than it was for adults.
I will say about him, there were some good things. Like he was the one that greenlit Batman the animated series and said, we want to tie in Batman cartoon to Michael Keaton's. And I thought that was a good idea. And I really also like the fact that he did say, like he said Schumacher when he chose Schumacher, why don't you make it more towards like, Batman or Rob match the cartoon because people love the cartoon. I thought that was a good idea. And in fact, he did say Schumacher did do the research. He said he watched the first Two-Face, the two-part Two-Face episode. He said he watched, although it's not really his fault that, the actors, I would really say it's the actors' fault more or less that they were the ones that took the wrong direction. Like Tommy Lee Jones went the other way with Two-Face.
Yeah, he made him too overacted, campy, Joker-like character instead of just being true faithful to who Harvey Dent was in the animated show than what we've seen. And I remember there's a footage of an interview promoting for the third movie that they were about to get ready to shooting with Tim Burton and Michael Keaton. Before they completely scrapped the whole thing. And they were originally wanted to get Robin Williams to play the Riddler in the role in Batman Forever.
Yeah. Well, you know what it was? And which Robin Williams kind of said, fuck y'all, because they screwed him over with Jack Nicholson Joker because John Peters, if we go back to that, Peters is the one who basically said that he really wanted Jack Nicholson, and so they screwed over Robin Williams because, hey, we're going to cast Robin Williams. And Robin Williams like, I'm going to play the Joker. And they're like, well, not really because Jack Nicholson signed on. They used him as leverage to like, get Jack Nicholson to sign on because...
I mean, if 1 Hour Photo proved anything, Robin Williams could have pulled it off.
He would have.
I'm the Joker.
Come on. I think they wanted to go for a little bit more less campy like Riddler, and then later when he stepped down a role, I believe that they wanted to change it up to appeal for younger audience of Batman Forever because it was going to get way too dark and way more mature after the results in Batman Returns for Tim Burton. So then they went and got Jim Carrey. They got him for that role because he was coming off of The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura.
Yeah, and they know he was much cheaper than it would have been to get Robin Williams anyway.
Oh yeah, Robin Williams was way too expensive to be cast in the role too. Like
By the way,
Jim Carrey
this
was
is a little
not
off
that. he was starting off to be and becoming a big name.
By the way, this is a lot of topic, but do you know that Jack Nicholson's likeness is very fucking expensive? McFarlane can't make any Joker figures because they said it's expensive. Like Jack Nicholson's likeness is expensive. That's why Nika hasn't made a Jack Torrance Shining figure yet.
Or have never made a Hot Toys of him.
Yeah, because his likeness is very expensive. Like, you know, it's like
I'm not surprised. It's Jack Nicholson, dude. He's a veteran biggest star.
He got paid back in for Batman 89, which I thought was crazy. We got some comments in the chat. We got, yay, go, Bryson Flowers says, yay, go Justice League. My favorite DC show is the earliest Teen Titans cartoon from 2003 with a theme song by the singer.
I have watched that show a few episodes, but I didn't watch it all the way through. But I really liked the Teen Titans animated show. That was a dope.
Yeah. My issue really with Lorenzo is the fact is he put a toy line for every freaking movie. Like even movies like Wild Wild West, which I'm like, why the hell does that have a toy line? Like what?
I remember they had a kids meal from Burger King.
What kid is watching that going, Mommy, I want the racist Confederate soldier figure with the robot legs.
God, I remember watching Wild Wild West back then in the 90s. That's when Will Smith turned down the role as Neo from The Matrix because he was their guy to play Neo until he read the script and saw didn't like what at first when he read it, and then he turned it down and he regrets it years later for turning down the Neo role.
I don't want to talk about The Matrix, but I mean, it's wild that The Matrix turned out the way it did, considering the Wachowskis literally after the success, they literally blew most of the money on IRL drugs and hookers. Really? They actually did this. So it's not a shock to me that the Wachowskis made one other good film, Speed Racer, and the rest are at best an absolute garbage.
I'm an unapologetic that I thought that Reloaded and Revolutions was actually better than what most people are saying it is, but that's just my opinion. I did not hate it. Because if you watch now Resurrections, the latest one, how fucking horrible that movie was.
Dear.
It made the third movie even a masterpiece. I know a lot of you guys didn't like the third movie, but I'm one of the people that I actually enjoyed it. I don't care. I will be the first to admit
50% of Resurrections. I always say that I rewatched it the other day, and I'm like, I'm at a 50-50 odds movie. 50% of the movie is brilliant. 50% of the movie is actually a good idea. Then the other 50 is like, what the fuck am I watching? It sounds like it's like the parody of The Matrix. Like, what the hell?
It almost felt like that they were trying to be too nostalgia, and they had to throw some fucking stock footage to remind us about the original film. Even the montage in The Matrix
Resurrection. Shit. There is a
scene of him taking a dump on his same routine.
Like, why do I have to watch Neil taking a shit?
Neil Patrick Harris is this man's therapist.
He's wearing the blue. He's literally wearing the blue glasses as a little bit of a symbolism to the blue pill that he takes every morning in the dream world.
Subtlety is dead and buried in a shallow grave.
Exactly. This fake fucking Agent Smith guy tells him that about the meta whole Warner Brothers that they're going to kill our contract if we don't move forward with the sequel, the trilogy. I rolled my eyes. I was like, what is really going on? By the time that happened, it fucking lost me.
But I will say though, Lorenzo, he made there are some good ideas in the 90s that they made, like for these Batman Forever. I will say, I've always said it is a good Batman movie. And I always say, look, if it would Marvel Entertainment, not Marvel Studios, but Marvel Entertainment were to make a Batman movie, Batman Forever is the exact movie they would have made.
Yeah, because that Batman Forever is something that it's campy and a little bit more for children, a little bit for adults, like 30% for adults, 50% for kids. And it's like you said, it kind of looks like something Marvel would have made if they were to make a Batman movie, if Marvel even had their legally able to do that.
It's not an insult to Marvel. I'm just saying that's and I think what we got because of Lorenzo, we got Batman the Animated Series, and yes, he did. There are some problems with Batman the Animated Series, the later seasons, because the studio, which I don't know if it was him, but I'm just gonna assume it was him. I'm just gonna assume it was the WB. Let's just say it's the WB kids, okay?
Yeah.
Because Bruce Timm has said that whenever they were making Batman the Animated Series, the studio kept implying. Like the studio kept trying to micromanage the series, and so that's kind of why they ended Batman the Animated Series, is because micromanaging because they were like, oh, we want to throw Bane in the series. We want to throw
Right.
this character. Like they want to do a Black Canary. They want to put Black Canary in the show.
It would have
But
been cool. It would have been cool seeing Black Canary in the animated
the
show,
studio
but
said,
but then
"No."
it wouldn't have made any sense to put her in that show because it's a Batman show. It's not one of his rogues gallery. It's something that you put like if they made a Green Arrow animated show, it made more sense. Or we already know that she shows up at some point in Justice League or Justice League Unlimited, and they had to scrap with the Batman series and end that off and move forward to this new superhero team up, which is Justice League, which that became a big hit on TV.
Bryson Flower said, if you want a Batman movie worth watching, Mask of the Phantasm. Well, you know what's funny, Bryson? This man right here, Bryson. This man right here, if I could find his name again. This man right here decided, hey, let's put a Batman movie in theaters, but not market it because we don't want to take audiences' attention away from Batman Returns. So we're just going to throw this movie under the bus the way Warner Brothers threw up under the bus Looney Tunes The Day the Earth Blew Up. That's basically what Warner Brothers did to Mask of the Phantasm. They threw it in theaters when nobody, even though word of mouth was kind of strong, nobody saw it because it came out Christmas Day, or at least the week of Christmas, to where I'm like, how the hell would you just botch that? I mean, it feels like it's sad because even Roger Ebert said it is one of the best Batman movies ever made. Like he loved this over Batman and Batman Returns. He said,
which we actually did a commentary on that movie a while ago.
Yeah, it's on the channel, by the way. But yeah, it's I just want to say, I think that really he was a terrible executive. In fact, he was actually voted out as the executive because he had the worst in the 90s. Him and Zaslav probably have a tie right now of the biggest flops because every movie in the 90s, with the exception of what was the only movie in the later 90s that was a success that kept the lights on at Warner Brothers? Starts with an M.
Matrix?
Yep. Yeah, every movie they had was flop, 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 flop. Even the Iron Giant flopped, and then they were just like, and then this asshole has to get up there and go.
Yeah, even though those movies were really good, it was not making money. The Matrix was the one that became a hit in the late 90s. They came out at the same time. It came out at the same time as The Phantom Menace, and this movie won for Best Visual Effects for The Matrix.
Considering what studios are going through nowadays, I will say that history doesn't often repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
Well, right now they're just in the middle of a rehabilitation for all the damage that Ramada or any of the previous executives at Warner Brothers that they caused in the past, and Zaslav just simply jumped right in the middle of this mess.
Yeah, and so this guy comes back in the picture because this guy, of course, is overseeing Superman, the Nicolas Cage one. Tim Burton was going to direct it, and Kevin Smith had actually wrote the script for it, and then this guy had the bright idea to hey. Kevin, why don't you oversee all of DC? And Kevin Smith said, I'm not your guy for that. I like making edgy comedies. I'm not your guy. Kevin Smith, I respect him for saying that because he could have been like, okay. And even told Kevin Smith, you can direct and write whatever movie you want. And he goes, I'm cool. I'm an independent guy, which I respect Kevin Smith more than anything for saying that, because, that could have went so sideways so fast.
It would have. Like, just because you're good at one thing doesn't mean you're good at another. They're being one of the studio heads and creative control of the whole property. Because he was just doing, like, indie comedies like Clerks, Chasing Amy, Jay and Silent Bob. He was busy just being an independent filmmaker and doing,
he did. Comedy movies. I will say he did contribute to that story because he actually...
Well, of course he did. I mean, there's a documentary called The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened, that was directed by John Schnepp, who's been trying to get that project going for a long time during the days. But, this was, R.I.P. to John Schnepp himself. He was back in the days of AMC Movie Talk, and he talked about trying to fund this whole documentary about what happened and why it got that movie from the Superman movie with Tim Burton.
Yeah. So
rest in peace to the legend John Schnepp.
Yeah, John Schnepp.
Yeah, R.I.P. to the guy. He was great. I love that guy.
And then this guy, of course, after Batman and Robin flops, they basically cancel Superman Legacy. Superman Lives.
They canceled that one. Yeah,
because they just gave the funds to Wild.
They originally wanted that to tie into the Tim Burton Batman with Michael Keaton. They originally want that to be a tie-in.
Yeah, they gave the funds and they gave some story beats to Wild Wild West.
Yeah, the Spider.
Yeah.
because in the third act it was required. In the third act, Superman fights a giant spider in the third act. And at first, there's been many pitches, there was many pitches that he was not going to originally fly. They were not going to originally let him be the traditional Superman that we know in the movie.
Because he said,
more of an alien.
His fault was he said he thought the suit looked too gay. That's what he thought the suit. John Peters said that about Superman. The suit looked too gay, but he didn't say gay. He said Faget. Like he said it looked like that. To which Kevin Smith even took that back. Like, you're a hairdresser from like you're a hairdresser in Beverly Hills. You're calling that. You're saying that about Superman? Really? Okay, I'm just saying, bro. Like that's a pot on the kettle. Even though he was dating at the time Kim Basinger, which Kevin Smith, go watch the documentary, the Superman documentary. Kevin Smith, if you really want to watch the whole context of what Kevin Smith was talking about, go watch An Evening with Kevin Smith 1, where he talks, or just Google Superman Lives Kevin Smith, and then he talks about it. It's really funny. I saw one documentary, Batman and Bill. Bob Kane, for context, Bob Kane screwed over Bill Finger. Basically, Bill Finger created the whole lore of Batman, and Bob Kane just drew it, and so Bob Kane took all his work. So they went to Warner Brothers and went to DC and said, "Hey, look."
You know what that reminded me? Chasing Amy. Remember this one Jason Lee's character that he inks the comic book? He's a tracer. He doesn't really draw them, and Ben Affleck is the one who draws the characters from the comic book. Calls him a tracer.
That's actually really funny. By the way,
If you watch Chasing Amy, it's funny, and they poke fun of it in Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back.
So
you a tracer, man.
Wrapping up on the Lorenzo part, we're about to jump to Paul Levitz. Lorenzo basically was fired in 2002 and Jeff Robinoff took over Warner Bros. And then he put in place because at the time, because DC was ramping up because they had Batman Beyond was starting up because they wanted Bruce Timm to do Batman. They wanted more Batman and stuff. And so then, of course, they played Paul Levitz kind of oversaw all of DC. Might consider Superman documentary. It's called The Death of Superman Lives. It's really good.
Yeah, it's called The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened. I mean, it's going to be hard to find it anywhere. You basically have to buy the Blu-ray. Yeah, you can try to watch it for free on YouTube.
So basically after he was fired and he basically, which, in Hollywood, if you get fired, you know what you do? You become a producer on movies.
Right.
Do you know where he went afterwards? Hasbro, to oversee the Transformer movies, to which I'm like, that right there works perfectly. That explains a lot, actually. I was like, he's overseeing Transformers. I'm like, that explains a lot.
Makes sense.
That explains a lot. I was like, he's like, you know what? Maybe we should have a giant Decepticon that looks like a spider. And no, that wasn't him. That was actually, but he said, maybe we should find a giant Decepticon who, I'm just, but that's funny. So Paul Levitz took over, and Paul Levitz has a mandate because he says, hey, look, we want to make a Batman movie he actually canceled Joel Schumacher's Batman 4 because Joel Schumacher wanted to make another one because Joel Schumacher always said he did not want to make Batman and Robin. He wanted to make a serious Batman movie that rivaled Year One. And he said that. He says, I don't want to make another campy Batman movie. I made freaking Flatliners. I made freaking The Lost Boys. I made A Time to Kill. Okay, well, Time to Kill is one of the darkest movies he's made, he said. And he goes, I don't want to make another shitty Batman movie. Which he didn't say it was shitty, but he said it was like campy. And he said he was very critical, saying the Warner Bros. Kind of assured him that he would get to make one, full. Is it a DVD or video release of the documentary? They have a Blu-ray, but the documentary is more or less like independently made, so it's not really on streaming. So that's why I said YouTube's probably the best thing to know. So if you want to look that, it is The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened. Just Google that on YouTube. You should be able to find the whole thing. Tim Burton's in the documentary. A lot of people that worked on it are in it. John Peters is one of the funniest guys ever. That dude, by the way, said he's been in over 700 street fights. A hairdresser from Beverly Hills claims he's been in over 700 street fights. And I'm just like...
Press X to doubt.
Kevin Smith has a whole thing about that producer. He says, that dude literally is the craziest guy I've ever met in my life. He said, that talks about, he goes, do you know who should play Superman? Sean Penn. And he goes,
oh, God.
Fast Times at Red High? He goes, yeah, have you ever seen him? in that movie Falling Down that just came out? Or he said, Dead Man Down? And he goes, no, I haven't. But he said, he has the eyes of a caged animal, a fucking killer. And he goes, it's Superman. Superman. Why would Superman look like a serial killer? He's like, it was the craziest shit he's ever heard. He's just like, then talk about how there's one thing before we move on to Paul Levitz. He talks about there's one thing where he says, what happens in the movie Superman, there needs to be an action sequence where Superman dies. And then, like, what happens when Brainiac goes to the fortress? What if a polar bear shows up and Brainiac kills one of them? And then all of a sudden, like, you know, one runs away like a bitch because we don't want to piss off PETA. he's like, you want me to write a scene where Superman is where Brainiac's razzling a polar bear? He says, what the hell? And do you know why? He said, because polar bears are the most fiercest animals in the animal kingdom. And then he's like, also, Superman has to fight a giant spider in the third act of the movie.
Yeah.
And he's like, why? Because spiders are the most fierce animal of the animal kingdom. And then at that time, Kevin Smith tells Warner Bros., this dude has way too much access to the Discovery Channel.
He's way too far into the National Geographic.
It's just,
makes you question the decisions. Like, what are we doing here?
He said, can you not call it a spider? He said, put it in there, but don't call it a spider. He goes, Stannis and Snare Beast?
I think it was probably for the best that they did not make that movie.
I mean,
there's too many ideas and questionable decisions.
It was just crazy. But yeah, Paul Levitz, though, took over, and his mandate, which I really dislike about this, was that he wanted basically, if a Superman is done in the movies, you cannot write, that character cannot be shared. Like, you cannot have Superman appear in a cartoon. He cannot appear in another movie. He only can appear in the movie it said thing. For instance, when Batman The Dark Knight was being made, the animated Batman TV show was not allowed to use Two-Face because he was being used in the movie.
Really?
Yeah, they said that was the mandate they had. You cannot use Batman. You cannot
from another animated Batman show.
Yeah, they said you can't use Two-Face because he's being used in the what's it called? He's being used in the Dark Knight. So they said
the Dark Knight.
Also, yeah, I mean that happens sometimes. Yeah, Aaron White's in the house. Another great Superman documentary is Look Up into the Sky, the amazing story there. Yeah, that's a great one too. I actually it's such
and also you can. I own it on digital, but you can also watch it for free on the WB Entertainment. They released a free full documentary that you can watch.
Good. It is so good. I wish they would.
I loved it. I loved it. This was like back in 2006, but around the time that they were promoting Superman Returns.
I wish that they would update and add Snyder and add Gunn to it. But,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I hope they do update the Superman documentary one day.
Probably will have to change narrators, though, because Kevin Spacey's the narrator.
Yeah, because Kevin Spacey was the narrator, and at the time, he was playing Lex Luthor.
Yeah. I will say with Paul Levitz, though, he did make some good ideas. I like some of his ideas. I kind of wish, but he was up until 2009, it says. He was up until 2009. So he oversaw The Dark Knight, but then he was let go after Watchmen. I will say I do think that was kind of petty that he kind of was like, oh, if Superman Joker can't appear here because he's in here, and also that he's the reason why Smallville was not allowed to use. Smallville was not allowed to use. What's it called? The Smallville was allowed to use Batman because they said, oh, well, we're going to make a Batman movie with and so.
Well, I brought this up before, but they were never going to put Batman on live action television show. There was no way in hell that they were going to do it because the character was so valuable on the silver screen. Because Superman was not as valuable as Batman was, because if putting Superman on the silver screen, and it's just not a $1 billion movie as much as big hit as they used to.
The showrunner had to fight him on including Krypton blowing up because they're like, well, in our new J.J. Abrams Superman movie, Paul Levitz set them two dudes down and said, well, in our J.J. Abrams Superman movie, Krypton doesn't blow up. It's actually being rumored that it doesn't.
I saw that. I saw that line. I saw that story going around. Like, hey, they were gonna have a story where what if Krypton never blew up and Superman was raised on Krypton? I was like, wait, what? How does that make any sense? That's ridiculous. No.
He said Krypton blows up. It's in the comics. They said, look, we're arguing your own mythology against you, guys. We're arguing with your own mythology. You're arguing against us. We're arguing about your own mythology. He goes, Krypton blows up. That's what happens.
Yeah, the title was going to be called Superman Flyby. That was the title for J.J. Abrams' Superman movie before it was completely changed and they changed directors. And they've leaked the audition for who was going to be Superman, and one of them was Henry Cavill. He was up for that role, the auditioning for Superman at the time. It was like around in his mid 20s when he was in an audition. And they thought he was way too young to play the role, and he didn't kind of resemble to Christopher Reeve, and they wanted to find someone that can resemble to him, and they found Brandon Routh to play it, and they're like, no, this is our guy.
You want to know why it didn't
If you
happen?
don't get on the swing, you get on the roundabout, as I always say.
Do you know why it didn't get made? Because of one stupid reason. Because the director McG did not want to get on a plane and fly to Australia because 9/11 had happened and he was scared. So he told Warner, I'm not getting on the plane. I'm not flying. He wanted to shoot in like Los Angeles. And they said, no, we're going to Australia. That's where the tax is cheapest. That's where, because back in 2004, a lot of movies were being shot in Australia. Like Revenge of the Sith was shot in Australia. The Matrix trilogy was shot in Australia. Because literally it was the cheapest thing to do was to shoot in Australia because of taxes. But then whenever in 2009, when they changed their tax laws, all the Hollywood got their ass out of Australia and went to Georgia.
Wow.
That's crazy. That's what's like everything, whatever. Yeah, the studio loves anything. They love tax cuts. So whenever you do a tax cut, Hollywood will show up at your door.
That's true.
Superman Flyby is a stupid ass title. Yes, it is.
To be fair, it was a working title. It was never going to be an official title when they were working on the movie at the time.
But yeah, so yeah, he didn't want to. Yeah, but because McG was fired because he didn't want to get on a plane and go to Australia because they were already pre-production of the movie. But then he quit. So then they're like, well, we got to find a new director. And by the time then they were like, well, look, why don't we focus on the script's too expensive anyway. And so they said, well, let's just go, because they started second guessing themselves. And then eventually the whole project fell apart. And then no one told the actor that was cast as Superman, by the way, that the movie's dead. So he gets like an email that said, he reads it in the trades like everyone else, the movie's dead. And he goes, what? No one told me? And it's just like, just the craziest shit ever. And then, of course, Batman there was 3 different attempts for a Batman movie after they canceled Batman 4. Because, they were going to make a Batman 4 with Schumacher and everything, and it was going to be called Batman Unchained or Batman Triumph.
Yeah, or Batman Year One, or like the Batman Year One. There were many directors that came and went. Like David Fincher was always was one of the upcoming
was the one I was going to talk about next. He was going to make Batman Year One.
Yeah, that's the one I was going to bring up. Yeah, that was definitely the one.
Joaquin Phoenix.
Yes, Batman.
Yeah.
And Alfred was going to be Black Alfred, who was going to be called Little Al. Which I'm like, that sounds great. That sounds amazing.
I mean, we pay to see that. We would love to see that.
I would love that. I'm like, this sounds actually pretty awesome.
Or if they would have cast Tony Todd, they could have called him Big Al.
Oh, dude, Tony Todd. That would have been great choice. Like, Tony Todd would knock it out of the park playing Alfred.
He could have said, Mr. Wayne.
They were looking at Denzel for the role of Alfred.
Mr. Wayne.
So they were looking at Denzel was the one considered. Denzel and Forrest Whitaker. I'm like, Forrest Whitaker most likely would have been cast.
That's true. Yeah. That would have made more
Denzel,
sense.
I don't see him doing Alfred.
I mean, Denzel playing Alfred, I don't think it would have been. He was a little around his 40s. I think he was around in his 40s at the time, and I don't think it would have felt right to have him cast as Alfred. That would have been a weird choice.
I think Forrest Whitaker probably would have been cast.
Forrest Whitaker would have made more sense, or Gordon. Gordon would have fit that role.
Maybe Morgan Freeman would have been cast the whole time. He would have been Alfred.
Yeah, dude. I mean, Morgan Freeman's the GOAT.
I mean, sure.
But what happened was the whole point was Bruce Wayne was homeless, living in his car. And it was, Darren Aronofsky was also going to direct that, but apparently him and Frank Miller kept arguing over the script because him and Frank Miller wrote the script. They kept arguing over direction. Darren Aronofsky wanted to go more psychological while Miller wanted to stay true to Batman. And he kept saying, that's not Batman. That's not Batman. To where eventually David Fincher just shows up and says, after their project fell apart, Fincher comes back with Frank Miller and says, I want to write a Batman Year One movie. And him and Frank Miller wrote Batman Year One, the movie. And Joaquin Phoenix was going to be Joker. And then what happened is Bruce Wayne was going to be homeless and would refuse to sign his inheritance to accept his family's dead. And then he lives in his car, and he's known as Selena Kyle is a prostitute. And she basically is Catwoman. She's going to be black. And basically,
I don't like it.
That was actually in Year One. That's what Year One is. That literally is the comic. That's literally what happened.
Yeah, that was in the comic book. That was definitely in comics.
Okay, I don't like that. I'm sorry. I just don't.
I mean, the homeless thing made sense because it was
The
it
homeless
kind of
thing's what I
it was.
hated.
I mean,
How's it
it kind of made sense because they kind of used that idea in Batman Begins, where he completely fell off the grid and he was practically homeless. He was.
They
Yeah,
show up.
well,
But the villain of the movie is like Commissioner Loeb is the main villain of the movie, and they said basically like at the end of the movie, him and Little Al move into like his Little Al's a mechanic, and so him and Little Al move into like Wayne Manor at the end after he signs over his family's fortune, accepting that Thomas Wayne is dead. Him and they move in, and then they go and they plan out the Batcave. They make blueprints for the Batcave. That's how the movie ended. Which I'm like, it doesn't sound terrible, but I'm like, I think honestly Nolan was the better choice, and I think what it was is the studio wanted to make something.
He probably wouldn't have had enough Batman in the movie.
Yeah, that was the biggest concern. It's like it's too dark, and it probably would have been rated R. And the studio's like, no, we want to make a PG-13 Batman movie for a mainstream.
But it
audience.
was still a very dark movie. Like this was not a kids movie. This is something that you don't take your kids to see.
Yeah. And then they brought in Christopher Nolan, which, by the way, now we're on Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan does not have. I know people say, "Oh, he had full creative control." No, he did not have full creative. He literally was only known for 2 projects at the time, Memento, and he was known for what's it called?
Insomnia. Yeah, because those were 2 projects that they didn't have creative control. He had more creative control over the original movies, but when it comes to Batman, no, he did not. He did not have full creative control.
The fact the studio told him they had mandates. They told Nolan, one, in which Nolan turned it down originally because he says, I'm not a big fan of Batman.
Because he's not a comic book guy. He's not like a big superhero fan.
It was his brother that convinced him, and then once he met
Jonathan Nolan.
Once he met David S. Goyer, they kind of like loved. They kind of had a love relationship, not like but like
like a brotherly love relationship.
Yeah, and so he's like, all right. He goes, he wanted to write it, and so they met. And the first thing they pitched was, he goes, I don't want him. I want to focus on Bruce Wayne, and I don't want to focus on Batman. And he really deconstructed that character. And so what happened is Nolan, the studio had 2 mandates: the Batmobile has to be in the movie, and the Scarecrow has to be the main villain, or at least a villain in the movie. But he originally said main villain. But then what happened was he convinced the studio, let's let Scarecrow be a villain in the movie, but I don't want the Scarecrow to be the main villain.
Yeah.
And so
they had to come to a compromise, because that's the beauty. That's what the thing that people completely are misinformed about creative control. When directors are making big blockbuster movies, unknown IP, they don't have full creative control. No matter how much you think they do, they really don't. And when they try to have full creative control, all hell breaks loose. But sometimes, there are times where studio does it for the wrong reason, like Justice League, the Whedon cut, for instance, and sometimes they do like interfere for all the wrong reasons, and it all backfires. But most of the time, they usually get it right.
Which, the problem, with Nolan, the only thing with Nolan did not want the Batmobile in the movie. In fact, he didn't even want. He said, there's no reason for the Batmobile to be in the movie because he's just like gliding around. He said, maybe for the sequel. But then the studio's like, nope, Batmobile, that's a concern. And so Goyer had to convince Nolan a couple of times. Every time the studio put their foot down, Nolan, in fact, was getting aggravated because he said, I don't want to put the Batmobile because he's gliding around. Why would he have a Batmobile? And so finally, Goyer's like, let me handle it, Chris. Let me handle it. So
Gore's like, hold my beer. Let me handle this, bro. Come on.
So Goyer and Nolan
break it down.
And his brother Jonathan even did a polish of the script where he was like, what if we could do it like this? And so then,
if it went his way, we would have had a different Batman movie.
Yeah, which Darren Aronofsky would have been. Yeah, Batman: Requiem for a Dream. Yes, it would have literally have been. It would have been a psychological movie, and people would have said, "This is fucking weird." It'd been like Ang Lee's Hulk or something.
I mean, there are parts I really liked Ang Lee Hulk for most part, but I know it's not that great.
I mean, it's really artsy. That's what it is. It's like
it was an artsy fartsy. Like it was too much of a. Yeah, do you remember that the whole day they were doing that comic book style montage where they're like panning the camera and panning another camera to the other character simultaneously, doing like a comic book page.
He didn't understand how to make comic book movies. Okay, that's the thing. People were expecting Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, but with the Hulk, and instead
exactly.
Like an art.
And he was coming off of the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
They got an art house comic movie like Joker. They were like, what the fuck is this? But what happened with Nolan, the thing with Nolan is he was they compromised, which Nolan, of course, Goyer really, he did. In fact, Cillian Murphy was the second choice for Batman, but he cast him as Scarecrow instead. And
Yeah.
of course, the only thing was because the studio wanted Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah, they did. They
wanted
also
Jake-
wanted Jake Gyllenhaal to replace Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man after Tobey Maguire's accident for the sequel, and they originally were going to get him to play Spider-Man.
Yeah, but the thing about Nolan, I like about Nolan that Nolan, he put his face says, no, I want to audition the actor. I want an actor that's to audition to play Batman. I don't want to just cast somebody as Batman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I like that he did that.
That's the best thing when you do. You always got to have an audition, do a costume test, see if they fit the role and for their vision for the movie. That's the only thing you do. You don't just grab them right off the street and acting stuff and just suddenly, oh yeah, let's just get them. Sometimes it could work, but most of the time it just will backfire. But there is a YouTube. You can find it on YouTube of the costume test for Batman Begins. They've used the costume for Batman Forever. The costume
and Amy Adams was the one who read with Christian Bale and Cillian Murphy for which I thought was so funny. But yeah, I think with Nolan, after Batman Begins was a success. It came out, and after the movie had come out and it was a success. Then of course the Dark Knight. We get to Dark Knight or Superman Returns. In fact, Superman Returns has come out because Bryan Singer had wanted to make like this Superman movie. He wanted to make it closer to Christopher Reeve, but then there was production problems. One was Singer, of course, left the set for a couple of weeks or days or weeks or whatever. Yeah. You know how he does. Singer likes to.
Well, because Singer dropped out of did not do the third X-Men movie. He dropped out and wanted to do Superman Returns.
I heard that. Everybody said, Singer disappeared for a couple of weeks, just like he does on every project.
Whatever he does,
well, Variety
in his little free time.
Like he went on a bender, and so when he came back from his bender, he finished the project. Which I'm like, that explains why the movie's $200 million because Singer disappeared for like 2 weeks. They're like, "Where's Singer at?"
Like, where the hell is he, bro?
I think it's probably best to not ask questions we don't want to know the answer.
There you go.
But then, that movie comes out, flops, and then of course they're like, because I remember like everybody's excited. We got Batman, now we got Superman, and then Batman.
Well, I don't think it really flopped. I mean, it did fine at the box office, but it just wasn't critically well received. It was a mixed response.
But then of course, they had the Superman problem then of course they were developing a Justice League Mortal movie at the same time they were making The Dark Knight. And Nolan didn't even want to come back for The Dark Knight because he says, I made my Batman movie, I'm fine. But then it wasn't until I think his brother talked to him about the Joker, and they were like, ooh, and then Nolan kind of got an idea. And then Nolan said he was going to do something else, and he kept thinking about the Joker, and he couldn't. So finally he says, I'm going to do it. And then
because he had an idea of what he wanted to do with Joker.
Yeah. And he told the studio, I'll do it if I can do this, this, and this. And they said, okay. And then he got to make the movie. And the only thing was, they were wanting at the time, they wanted to make a Justice League movie, but they wanted Christian Bale to be in it. But then Nolan said no, because this Batman is his own grounded real world. And so then, of course, they hired George Miller to direct Justice League Mortal. George Miller, who made Mad Max movies and
he made all of the Mad Max movies.
They had Armie Hammer was going to play Batman. DJ Caruso was going to play Superman.
You may have remembered DJ Caruso, who was in the G.I. Joe Retaliation.
Yeah, and
he was in that movie, and then he was
up
for the role to play
2 and 1 and 2 as the fat kid that turns into a.
Yeah, and they were going to get Aquaman. They were going to get the Wally West Flash with Adrian Brody to play the Wally West Flash. Yeah. They were going to go strictly. They were aiming more of the influence from the Justice League animated series, where they want this to be a standalone story for this movie. And Jay Baruchel was supposed to be playing Maxwell Lord in that storyboard.
Yeah, but what happened is the movie, but the script, well, here what happened. There's 3 reasons the project died. One was Australia.
Yeah.
Because they changed their tax laws, and so all the production was going to be there, and that's really what killed the end of the project. The first one was there was a writer's strike that was about to happen. And of course, they wrote the script, like they just threw all the shitty ideas into the one script, and they're like, all right, pencils down. And then they're like, there's no way we can make this movie. The studio's like, there's no fucking way we're making this.
But also, it was the most expensive movie to make for over like $300 million on that budget. Over like $300 million on that budget. And they were ready to go. They had the cast photos. They were in Australia. They were about to go ready into production, and it completely axed the whole thing. Yeah. They have a costume like leaked online showing the whole cast in the costume.
Yeah. Well, the plan was after the movie had fallen apart because of one reason. One was because the movie had fallen apart because Nolan, because of three reasons. One, the writer strike. So then they said, we're just going to delay production until 2009. And then, of course, the second thing was Australia changed their tax laws because George Miller, like, he's Australian. He likes shooting all the stuff in Australia. They changed their tax laws to where they said, oh, we're not shooting in Australia anymore since they changed their tax laws. And that's when Miller said, we're not shooting Australia. I'm not doing it then. And then the third thing, and this is really what killed the project officially, Nolan's Dark Knight had come out and was the highest grossing movie of 2008.
That's what truly killed it, because they did not want to take the risk of coming out at the same time, because the Dark Knight was a hot box office, like big skyrocketed, and it got an Oscar nomination, and Heath Ledger won that Oscar even after his passing. He won that Oscar for Best Supporting Role. So it was on a heat for the Nolans, and there was no way that they were going to try to make it work of having multiple variations of these superhero DC characters like Batman and Superman to be at the same time. At the time, people were not ready for that. It would have drawn a lot of confusion. But imagine how different it would have been if they actually made that movie.
It would have been a shitty movie.
Even though, well, that's easy to say, because even on paper it may sound stupid, but your goal is to try to execute your stupid ideas. Even with great ideas that can be done on paper, there have been many movies that you can read on paper that sounds amazing, but most of the time they fell on its face.
Yeah. Which, to be fair, before we go on to Jeff Johns, to be fair, this was Paul Levitz's last thing as DC before Jeff Johns took over, and his thing was what he was going to do. Because his plan, he wanted to get that Superman, that Justice League movie made, but then he said it would have been like J.J. Abrams' Star Trek reboot in 2009. It would have been that cool. But then what happens is it fell apart, and then, of course, they're like, all right, you know what? We're going to make Watchmen instead. So then they made Watchmen, and then, of course, that movie comes out.
It didn't do well.
It didn't do well. Nobody gave a shit.
I love that movie, and I love the director's cut of Watchmen when it came out on Blu-ray. It came out in the director's cut for the 3-hour cut, and I was like, dude, why didn't they just put that out in a 3-hour cut in theaters? It would have worked. It would have been a better version than what we got in the theatrical version. What are you doing? And it was at the time when the R-rated superhero movies with DC, I don't think the casual movie going ons were that appealed to it. They want to have a good lighter tone like DC movies, and not a dark R-rated gritty superhero anti-heroes like Watchmen.
Which, to be fair, Paul Levitz did get some good ideas going. Like, for instance, we got Constantine with Keanu Reeves. I love that movie. And then we also
that was back in 2005, the same time Batman Begins came out.
He did fuck us with Catwoman, but we did get Batman.
But here's the thing: most of the time, most people didn't even know Constantine was a DC character. Yeah. It was coming off the idea when Blade came out in the late 90s. Nobody knew that was a Marvel character to begin with. Casual did not pay attention that this was based on a Marvel character. It was just an action vampire, like Wesley Snipes movie. And with Keanu Reeves' Constantine, that was probably the same circumstances for that movie. And even though it didn't really do as well, but looking back on it 20 years later, it became a cult following.
I still love that my radio station, when I was on my way to school, the movie had just come out, and these radio DJs that saw it and said, "I'm gonna tell you something, man. Let me tell you." He says, I don't care how many. He says, this guy tried to commit suicide. I don't care. I'm going to tell you right now, the movie kind of explains this. Every time this man kills a demon, doesn't matter how many demons he kills.
Okay, you kind of sound like the dad from Friday. What's his name? I can't remember his name. Why not have a time? Get in the kitchen. You in the kitchen.
But he's like, but I just laugh because the guy in this very country accent goes, let me tell you, I don't care how many times he kills a demon, he's still going to hell at the end of the movie. Because,
he's still going to hell. He's going to hell
because he tried to commit suicide. I'm just laughing.
But that was the mythos of the origin of Constantine. I mean, Keanu Reeves was coming off of Matrix movie, and I really loved that film when it came out. I never watched it in the theater. I only watched it when we had to rent it at Blockbuster, and my brother showed that movie to me. Yeah. And I wanted to watch it in theaters, but I missed out on it at the time. And I remember just being blown away by that movie, and I wanted more.
So moving on to Jeff Johns now. Jeff Johns his first movies out of the gate that he greenlit were Jonah Hex, The Losers, and Green Lantern.
So
I would say that, sorry for cutting you off, but The Losers, I actually really like.
I like The Losers too.
But what you said with the Jonah Hex,
you are literally one of the only people outside of the movie trivia space, which is very active, that actually remembers what The Losers is, and I include myself in that
I
one.
love The Loser. It's a great movie.
It's
Jeffrey
actually
Dean
really
Morgan is
good.
awesome.
So
I did
two-
not see it in the theater. I thought it was going to
Mama
suck.
did raise
I
no
thought
fool.
it was going to be really bad
Mama
until I
did-
saw that movie later on cable. And I was like, wow,
so two
it's actually pretty good.
shitty ass, stinky ass movies, and one movie that barely anyone remembers. Well done, Mr. Johns. Good form, Mr. Johns.
And he wrote one of those movies. He wrote the one. He wrote the Green Lantern movie. He co-wrote the Green Lantern movie.
He did. Martin Camo, the guy who did Goldeneye, the Mask of Zorro, and Casino Royale, directed Green Lantern. And I won't lie, when that movie came out, I drank the Kool-Aid.
And do you know who made Jonah Hex?
Looking back on that movie years later, I really hated it more. I was like, what the hell was I smoking?
I never liked it from the beginning. Like, how do you make Josh Brolin boring? That's how. And
Oh
like,
yeah, but
The Crank
Jonah
guys
Hex,
made it.
I hated it when
Michael
that movie came
Fassbender's
out. I
in the
hated
movie.
Jonah Hex.
Michael
After
Fassbender
that-
was the villain of the movie.
after that movie came out and after Green Lantern came out, someone at WB must have been like, "Get out of our company!" Like,
They're
get
like,
out
what
of
the
our
fuck
company.
is that? What the fuck is that?
Which, you know what the funny thing is, okay, then Nolan comes around after, because Green Lantern, they were going to build a cinematic universe because they introduced Amanda Waller in that movie.
Oh, of course.
And
They did.
And then it flopped, and then they were just like, well, we're going to reshuffle that movie. And then The Dark Knight Rises, as Nolan's finally making The Dark Knight Rises. And then Jeff Johns had no creative input at all because Nolan said, if I make it, I'm doing it my way. And so they were like, okay. And then Jeff Johns basically was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just produce Man of Steel. Well, to be fair, you'll be a producer on Man of Steel. Nolan said he's going to oversee Man of Steel. So then, of course, after Dark Knight Rises success, David S. Goyer, they're trying to figure out how. All right, Bane blows up the football stadium. And he blows up all the bridges. All right, we're having writer's block, and so then David S. Goyer picks up a Superman comic, and he's like, I got an idea for. And so the next day, they're supposed to meet back again to figure out what Bane's going to do next. And then, of course, Jeff Johns is like, I wasn't thinking about Batman. I was thinking about Superman. And he's like, well, let's hear it out. And then he tells them his ideas for a Superman reboot. And then they call Warner Brothers up and goes, yeah, we're not done with the script yet, but we have an idea for a Superman movie. And the Warner Brothers has literally been trying to hear pitches, heard like 20 pitches from different writers to try to figure out, because Bryan Singer at that point had left the project. And the project and Henry and Brandon Routh's contracts up, so they're basically
and Brandon Routh talked about it in Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum that they axed the project for the sequel of Superman Returns. They had a plan to bring General Zod back and have had Jude Law be cast as General Zod, and then they were going to have Brainiac as one of the main villains of the movie. And which at the time that it was originally going to be called Superman Man of Steel. For the sequel of Superman Returns, and I myself was really excited, even though the Superman Returns didn't live up to the hype, but I still wanted to see Brandon Routh continue to play Superman because I think he was not part of the problem of that movie. But then they had to scrap the whole thing, reboot it.
Well, to be
David
fair,
Goyer
they hired Brandon Routh because Brandon Routh said they waited. They didn't want to rehire him, so they waited until his contract was up. Because Nolan's like, I don't want to bring Brandon Routh. I want to hire the actor. So Nolan told them. So they waited until his contract expired. Then they're like, we're going to search for a new Superman. To which Brandon Routh's like, well, fuck you guys. I'm just like,
he's like, screw you guys. Like you dragged my name in the mud. You're an asshole. But with the whole reimagining of Superman, David Goyer wanted to have the more grounded, realistic, like they did with Batman. And yeah, like you said, that they were shooting it around the time with The Dark Knight Rises, the third film. And Nolan had to be the one. Nolan had to be the one that turned that script into WB and move forward with that whole vision.
Yeah,
and Nolan was only slapped on as an executive producer, but he was never hands on in that movie.
Yeah,
when
he only showed up like the set a couple times. He said, in fact, he literally
showed up one day on set. He literally showed up one day on set.
Where they're on the Zod, the one where like they're on the back of the what's it called? The back of the the plane, whatever, where like he's like, Miss Lane, don't sit there, Miss Lane.
Oh yeah, it was on the military plane.
Yeah, because there's a picture of Nolan on set, sitting on the plane with Snyder, and Snyder's got a giant beard because he looks like he hasn't slept in like 4 weeks or bathed.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do, bro. But yeah, with Nolan, Nolan was the one that wanted Zack to direct it because he loved what he did with Watchmen because he said that movie was ahead of its time. And he thought, like, no, you need to get Zack Snyder to direct Man of Steel.
Because they wanted him to do it. They said, look, we'll delay it for like a year So that way you can make The Dark Knight Rises, but Nolan's like, I really don't want to make another Superman. I don't know what I want to make afterwards.
But also, he didn't even want to direct the third Dark Knight movie. He didn't have full creative control of the first two, and then he did, like, they just dumped him the truck full of money. Hey, we're going to have this third movie to be the final send off.
They wanted
Christian Bale's Batman.
And this is how much creative control he had. The mandate was they had a mandate. They said, well, we want the Riddler to be in the movie, and we want Leonardo DiCaprio to be on. But Nolan says, if I return, I get full creative control of the movie and final cut. And they were like, oh, can the Riddler at least be the villain? Nope, I want to choose my own villain. And they're like, well, okay, fine. And
I mean,
so
but here's the thing. If Heath Ledger had been alive at that time, he would have been the secondary villain in the third Dark Knight movie. He would have. And yeah, they had to, like, you know what? He did great with the Dark Knight movie. It was successful, and we're going to let him have full creative control for the third movie and let him finish off the story.
And he was producing at the time Man of Steel, which he said Dark Knight Rises came out, was a huge success, even though they did have that tragedy that happened that year.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Shooting in theater. And which that was one thing I think that hurt a little bit of its box office, because some psychopath goes into a theater and kills a bunch of people. And
But they managed to make over $1 billion for the third movie. I mean, yeah, I do remember when they broke that news, and it just like, oh my god,
well, opening day.
What's crazy is that I actually went to a midnight screening of Dark Knight Rises like the night before. I can't remember the exact date, but it was just crazy to think about.
Oh yeah, I remember I remember going to see The Dark Knight Rises, and they showed the very first teaser trailer of Man of Steel, and it was during the narration with Jonathan Kent, and they had two different versions. They put the Russell Crowe's Jor-El in that teaser trailer online. You had to watch it on YouTube, but when you're going to see it in the theaters, they had the Jonathan Kent version narrated the teaser trailer, and then you see Superman flying up in the sky, and I was so blown away that we had to wait a whole year for that movie to come out. And when they put out that teaser at the time, and I remember back in I think it was like in 2012 or something, or 2011, when they first showed that still photo of Superman in action photo of him in the bank vault.
Yeah,
like I remember that. I was like, oh my god, this looks awesome! I cannot wait to see Zack Snyder's Man of Steel.
And then with the movie, the problem was whenever after the movie come out, the movie was met with a mixed reception. Like half the people loved it, half the people hated it. Because some people, the biggest issue is Superman does too much destruction in that movie, and he kills in the movie. And so I want to say, first off, I don't think, honestly, the destruction, I'm like, look, it's a superhero film. I mean, the Avengers and Transformers, they look at what happened with Transformers 3. There's too many freaking buildings, like they were blowing up left and right. And then on top of that,
the Avengers. Remember the first one? How much destruction was in New York when the aliens invaded? How much of that shit got destroyed?
Superman 2, which will be up on my channel on Thursday. Like that whole scene, like there's destruction there. Like Metropolis gets completely wrecked, and like Superman gets thrown into a cigarette truck.
So yeah, Marbles, brought to you by Marbles.
Transformers. Mark Wahlberg crashed into a beer truck.
But also this had more destruction, especially with the world engine that was being terraformed by Zod. But also like Superman destroyed a lot of cities. No, he wasn't. He was trying to fucking save everyone. He couldn't be everywhere at once. He had to stop that world engine, because if he had not stopped that, everyone on this earth would have been fucking incinerated. Oh, yeah. They would all been gone. He saved the entire fucking planet. This, at the time when that movie came out, had a mixed reception. I came out of the fucking theater loving that fucking movie.
I loved it too.
And I read the responses like, what are they talking about? This movie's so good. How do they not like it? Because you want to know why they didn't like it. And I don't want to put people's words in their mouth, but I've been hearing the reception. It was not the kind of Superman that they wanted. They wanted the traditional comic book lighthearted, like Christopher Reeve's Superman movie.
No, Superman.
That's what the audience wanted, and that's what critics wanted too. They wanted the happy go, gosh golly, Lois. That's what Superman they wanted. The lighthearted, good do-gooder, whatever you want to call it.
There are people who have not watched a comic book movie past 1985, and it really shows.
I am going to play devil's advocate here and say I think Man of Steel did ruin Superman for a lot of people, only because I feel like half the people, there's two groups of people. There's half the people that fuck this movie, this ruined Superman. Then half the movie that said, oh, this is Superman. This is 100% accurate Superman. And then there's us in the middle who are like, I understand the flaws of the movie, but I still like it.
But also, it was a brand new take. It was a
I
brand
said
new
in my
take.
review of Man of Steel like a bunch of years ago, it's a flawed masterpiece. It's flawed, but when it is on, it's really on.
Yeah, like I don't like the ending. I feel like Superman should have flew up at the end and flew away instead of just meets Lois Lane and ends up smiling. I'm like,
Hey,
what?
I don't care. I love that ending. I don't give a fuck. The only criticism I had with Man of
think-
Steel is the casting of Lois Lane. Amy Adams, with all due respect with Amy Adams, I love Amy Adams, but she did not fit the role with Lois Lane. And I wasn't a big fan of how they've used her in the movie for plot conveniences. I was like, what? Why is she involved in this? Makes no sense to me. That was the only my biggest critique. But to me, the more I watched it, the more I love it. It gets better on rewatch. And also, people were not really ready to have this type of superhero movie that is more the tone of the more grounded, realistic, dark, gritty, with a lighthearted character who is living in our world today. And they were not ready for it because they wanted to be a little bit more like the MCU's, like more traditional comic book character and staying faithful to it, if that makes any sense.
I will say one thing that, I think one thing was the movie come out and it was divisive. So then, of course, whenever the sequel, but the movie was still profitable to where they made that big announcement. I remember at Comic-Con, they made that big announcement that Batman's going to be in it, the logo, Batman versus Superman. People were like, oh my God, yeah!
Dude, I was one of the people that was hyped. And they were talking about the slate, too, of what they were going to do with DC, including the setup for Justice League. I watched that video. The actor who played the General, Lennox, who was reading the quote from The Dark Knight Returns of him beating Superman.
Remember this day.
My hand at your throat.
I want you to remember the day that I beat you. Just an all-time.
I want you to remember the one man who beat you. And they put the Superman logo, and they put the Batman logo, and everybody was going insane. And I was blown away that it destroyed everything that Marvel was announcing at Comic-Con. They stole the entire spotlight.
I know.
And then, oh no.
Which, to be fair, before we drop the oh no, what had happened was they originally, because I remember Ben Affleck was cast as Batman, and then people were like, oh. Like, that's when the people were like,
everybody was shitting on the casting choice. I was one of the people that was rooting for him.
He was one of the best parts of that whole slate, but if we go into the minutia on that, I will happily defend that.
He announced
and it literally took a few years. It literally took a few years to get that movie made, especially when you brought it up before that they had to do rewrites because originally it was going to be David Goyer who was writing the script. Then they did, and then they had to do rewrites, and they went and hired Chris Terrio, who worked with Ben Affleck on Argo, that won him an Academy Award for Best Picture and Best Adapted Screenplay.
Released March 25th.
Oh, wow. Really? Oh, shit,
wow.
dude. Yeah.
That is so crazy. We've not realized.
What a convenient, barely a convenience here. What the hell? Oh, my God.
Well, if you got your Blu-ray copies, pop them in.
And
Batman, Terry,
I do remember I was hyped. I do remember back in the day.
What about the disc, guys? Come on, let's go, Matt. Get your movies going.
Let's get this ready. Let's do the Batman Terry. Let's just jump ahead.
But the movie had come out today. But the movie came out today, like 10 years ago?
Yeah, it was like 9 years ago. 9 years ago. It's 2025, so it was in 2016.
The movie comes out 9 years ago, and then of course I remember the movie. First off, the casting, but then you find out all this, and then you find out after the movie released that there was a lot of controversy behind the scenes. Like one was, the Warner Brothers did not like how dark the script was. And then on top of that, they basically, apparently he had plans that wall that the crippled guy in the wheelchair was going to be Metallo.
Yeah, Scott Mooner. Yeah,
Lex Luthor turned him into Metallo.
McNary. And the unfortunate name of Scoot.
Scoot. Yes, Scoot.
And apparently the movie...
Here's little Scoot. He's about to scoot away.
Yeah. Yeah, so he was going to be Metallo, and the guy in the wheelchair was going to be Metallo. And then he was going to kill Superman at the end, which I'm like, that sounds like a cool idea, even though some of the designs look shit. But I'm like, that was just concept design. We don't know if that would have been the final design. But we saw him flying in one of the concepts of him as Metallo.
Dude, I remember the set photos when they were shooting BVS. They had that green jumpsuit on his leg, and people were saying, "Is he going to play the Flash?" People were so jumped the gun so quickly. No, he's not. He's not playing the Flash. What are you talking about?
What happened is, of course, this is all for a rumor. Okay, this has just been the rumor, but the biggest rumor. So what I'm about to say is a rumor. There's no stuff to back this up because Jeff Johns is not going to say if it is true or not. Neither is Kevin Feige. But Kevin Feige and Jeff Johns are friends. That is true. This is 100% true. But it's believed and is rumored, this is just a rumor, we cannot prove this, that Jeff Johns told Feige about his plans. And then Feige, of course, a couple weeks later announces Captain America Civil War instead of Captain America the Serpent Society, and basically changes the, and then of course it's like, oh,
Change the title.
And then of course they rewrite him, which he did tell the writers, because they said they told us to write a different script after like the fact. And so they start rewriting the script and everything and making it a team versus team movie. And so Zack Snyder apparently got scared and found out that he was furious that Marvel leaked that got his plans. So then he decided, oh, what we're going to do is we're just going to rewrite the script, and we're going to include Doomsday and make Lex Luthor the sole villain and get rid of Metallo completely. And of course, that movie that turned out really well. And then of course, the movie was 3 hours long, so the studio made him cut it down to 2 hours. And of course, the movie comes out, and the movie gets negative reviews, and people are really, it makes $1 million. It underperforms because they spent around 400. The movie
it made more than what Man of Steel did. It made over 800 million globally, but they were hoping that movie, they were hoping for over $1 billion or maybe more for Batman v Superman, because it was the most hyped comic book movie of that time. And what you brought up about the rumor about them leaking the idea of what they were going to do with DC, especially with BVS, it kind of makes a little bit more sense, because if you watch Captain America Civil War, it literally is pretty much the same story as BVS. Think about it. It literally is. Go watch between these two. They're pretty much similar. And I think there was no coincidence that they did originally wanted to call it Captain America: The Serpent Society until the hype with BVS. They had to up their A game. They had to fucking outdo fucking DC.
Which I knew that there's also. Oh, sorry, Ryan.
I feel like for DC in this era, there were 3 options: be better than, be less than, be different than. They could try to be better than Marvel. They didn't. Ideally, they didn't want to be less than, so they should have tried to have been different. Lean into the darker. Just try and be different. Because keep in mind, MCU in this era was like Civil War, and they were dark, but they were not so lighthearted with their humor that they just killed their movies with half-hearted yuck jokes, like how Thor: Love and
goofy,
Thunder,
not too like goofy, campy, but still more lighthearted than DC. But it's not about whether the tone is tone, but you just got to make the best movie possible and don't be so caught up in trying to catching up.
All I'm saying is that they should have done the different. Like, they should have been the absolute complete polar opposite tone, direction of everything that they should have done. I have this and I won't get too deep into the weeds on this, but I had this idea of after Man of Steel, after the destruction, everything happens. It affects Gotham so bad it turns it into a no man's land. And then have the solo Batman movie, and then you do your Wonder Woman movie, and then you do BVS, and that's more of a tangible reason as to why Batman doesn't like Superman, because Superman was so powerful that it destroyed Gotham, and Gotham had to literally rebuild itself.
That would have been better.
And, but also, you had Batman, who has been Batman for 20 years, who was at the end of his career, and that he's fed up of everything that's going on in his own world, and how much it affected him when Superman came to Earth. And I thought that the opening of that movie in BVS was one of the greatest opening in any comic book movie. I don't care what anybody else says.
He's a visual good storyteller. Zack Snyder's a visual storyteller.
He is. He's a great visual storytelling, but also
he's a bad writer.
But also coming back to what you were saying about making it dark in tone, they did try that. And for BVS, it did not live up to their expectations, because audiences says, "Oh, this movie's too dark. Why do you got to make Superman so dark? That's not Superman." Blah blah blah.
That's my point.
And also, that's why the studio really panicked. They panicked,
that's my point.
And they wanted to change directions. Yeah,
and then they got this motherfucker right here named Jeff Johns to basically micromanage Justice League, to which Zack Snyder didn't even want to first off make Batman vs Superman. He wanted to make Man of Steel 2. But then he accidentally said this to the studio, saying, it'd be really cool in a post-credit scene of Superman 2 if a box of Kryptonite gets delivered to Wayne Manor. And then, of course, the studio's like, make that instead. Make the Batman versus Superman. He goes, oh, okay. And then, of course, by that time, David S. Goyer left the project Batman versus Superman, because then to Chris Terrio. So then Zack Snyder and Chris Terrio rewrote the Justice League movie. And apparently the movie was so dark that Jeff Johns reported to the studio, this movie's too dark. Like, Wonder Woman Lois Lane dies in the first 10 minutes of the movie, And then Superman goes psychopath and tries to kill the Justice League and everything. And it's where like the studio's like, this is too dark.
Well, they were trying. No, from that pitch, from what you were describing, that was literally the plot of Injustice: Gods Among Us. They wanted to go for that route,
but the studio said no, and then him and Chris Terrio had to rewrite the script, and then they wrote the script we have now, the movie we have now, the Snyder cut. But then of course the studio, Jeff Johns was going behind his back the whole time, talking to the studio, telling the studio, oh, this movie is too dark again, and he's just like going behind Zack Snyder's back, and him and Peter Berg, and then him and John Berg, not Peter Berg, John and John Berg were there. Which John Berg, from what I heard, really liked Zack Snyder, was trying to be buddy with him and trying to like, hey, look, Zack, whatever you need, but I can help you, man, if you need me. But Jeff Johns was like a snake and was just going around behind his back. We're talking, like, you know, kind of like the guy that talks shit about you behind your back. Like that's what Jeff Johns was kind of doing to Zack Snyder, and was going and telling the studio, to where eventually they finished the movie, but then the studio like was trying. Zack Snyder turned a cut of the movie in, but then the studio didn't like that cut. But then his daughter had tragically passed away, and then of course Jeff Johns took that as I can. And then he convinced the studios to like get other directors to look at it and recut the movie. And so Joss Whedon had the best pitch because they showed it to Patty Jenkins, they showed it to a couple of other directors, and then Patty Jenkins said, "I don't want to touch Zach's movie. You know, let Zach wait. We can delay the movie or whatever." But of course, the head of the studio, not Walter Hamada, but Kevin Tsujihara.
Yeah, Kevin Tsujihara.
I don't have issues with that guy. I think he's not a bad CEO. The only problem I had was there's two things I don't like what he did. What he did to this movie, and the fact that he's sitting there sleep. He cheated on his wife with another woman, and basically told her, "If you have sex with me, I'll put you in my movies." That's the one. There's only two things I hate. That's kind of what killed his career at Warner Brothers. His mistress, him and his mistress thing. That mistress thing kind of killed his career. But I will say, he did at least he was the reason why Mad Max Fury Road got released, because Jeff Robinoff told them to shut the movie down because it was such a nightmare production that he told them shut the movie down, whatever shot. And then Kevin, after he left the studio and Kevin Tsujihara took over around 2012, he looked at the footage and says, "I like this movie. What do you need left?" And he goes, we just need 2 weeks worth of shoots so we can finish the movie." And he goes, "Okay." And then that's how Mad Max gets finished. And it's because of him. And also, he believed in the DC universe. He said, "We want to make the DC universe like the Harry Potter universe." And he even said, "We should literally oversee a bigger universe." And the only thing is, he hired the wrong people, like Jeff Johns and Jonathan Berg, to oversee that. And then they botched it after Justice League. And because they brought Joss Whedon on, and then obviously you can look it up. Joss Whedon was a nightmare on set. He made racist remarks towards Gal Gadot and Ray Fisher and just all kind of stuff. And and so and he even insulted Gal Gadot's accent, to which I'm like, that's crazy. And and so and so it was just a nightmare to where Ben Affleck was even drinking on set, would just go from shooting and go and drink in this hotel room.
Oh yeah, he was going through alcohol and substance abuse and his divorce with Jennifer Garner. It was just a worse time for him.
And
when
Henry
they were
Cavill
doing the
had
reshoot.
the mustache with Henry Cavill mustache gate.
Because he was wearing a mustache because he was shooting Mission Impossible Fallout, and the studio did not want him to shave off the beard. They said, "No, you're not going to shave off the beard. I mean, not the beard, mustache. You're not going to shave out the mustache." So they had to do a fucking awful CG, like erasing the mustache in that movie, and they're like, like Frankenstein's monster look-alike. Oh my god, it was just a big panic. It was a big panic for WB, especially even before Justice League. It was after with Man of Steel. They heard the mixed receptions. They originally, like you said, they originally want this to be a Man of Steel 2. They wanted to turn this into a trilogy, but they seen what the success of the Avengers. They want to play catch up, but also the reason why they want to put Batman in the movie, they think that Man of Steel 2 would not have done so well because the audience were not sold by the Henry Cavill Superman.
I agree. Which the funny part about the whole mustache thing was Tom Cruise. They told Paramount, "We will pay every day that we will shut down Mission Impossible and pay for every day the movie shut down, so that way Henry Cavill could shave his mustache off, shoot the movie, and then come back, and then he could grow it back out." And they go, "No." Tom Cruise said, "That's stupid." And then the director of the movie, Christopher McQuarrie, goes, he says, "What if we buy a really nice fake mustache and put it on Henry Cavill, and that way nobody can tell?" And then Christopher McQuarrie said to the press, "I've worked with fake mustaches before. I know what a fake mustache is." And he goes, "You can tell." And I'm just like, I worked with a fake
Oh
Mustang.
boy!
I just thought that
In
was
the
so funny.
business, in the business, we call this foreshadowing.
I just thought that was so funny. So then, of course, the movie comes out because Kevin DeJahara wants to make sure, because Joss Whedon even begged Kevin DeJahara, can we delay it to March so I can have more time to work on visual effects and the story? And he go, nope, I got a bonus because we're going to merge with AT&T at the end of the year. And I really want to, that might affect my bonus. So I'm going to try to release it in June. And even if it comes out and flops, I still get my bonus. So then they put it out in November and it flops and it gets terrible reviews. And to where eventually, guess what? They were like, yeah. And so then, of course, they said, you know what? Nobody gives a shit about Zack Snyder's verse. And so then,
but also, after they were wrap production before Zack left because his daughter committed suicide and he had to leave the project and not finish the movie. And he had to take time off because after what happened to his adopted daughter, like, oh man, that was really rough. And when I heard that news, I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And the Joss Whedon was announced that he was going to take on the Vision. But my guess is that WB really took advantage of Zack Snyder's vision of the movie. They did not want him. They did not want him to direct it. But at the time when BVS came out after the release, he was shooting Justice League in 2016 in the same year when that movie hit in theaters.
What happened is, of course, they fired Jeff Johns and Peter. Well, they took producer deals on other. They say, oh, you can work on shows like Stargirl and stuff. But yeah, you're not working at DC anymore. They basically told Jeff Johns and Peter Berg, you're not working on DC anymore. And so they left, and then they brought in Walter Hamada, who oversaw their horror division for New Line, like the Conjuring universe and stuff like that. And Walter Hamada said the first thing he wants to do is, I want to make this lighter. Like he said, the first thing he did was with Aquaman. He says, I want to make Aquaman a fun movie that, and he told James Wan, do whatever you want. It's your movie. But he said, make it a fun movie. And so James Wan made Aquaman. Aquaman comes out, makes $1 billion.
Yep. It blew it right out of the water that nobody was expecting.
Yeah. And then guess what?
You want an octopus playing the drums? Sure.
Hey, I mean, it was kind of cool to see the octopus playing the drums.
I hate that people online, Basso, I want to point this out. People online go, oh, Walter Hamada's no one's ever made a successful movie. Zack Snyder has made $1 billion. I'm like, they show Aquaman. Zack Snyder is a name-only producer credit. Zack Snyder said he's never even stepped foot on Aquaman.
He was never hands-on. He was just entitled to it because this is the guy who gave us Man of Steel. So of course they're going to slap his name as a producer. Just because his name is slapped on there, credited, that doesn't mean that they were hands-on. Like, for instance, Steven Spielberg. Remember how many projects of shows and movies that he was entitled to when he had literally nothing to do with it?
So Walter Hamada makes $1 billion. So then they're like, all right, we're going to stick with this guy. He made us $1 billion. That's their first billion, by the way, DC made. That's the first billion.
The first DC movie to make $1 billion.
And then The Flash, and oh no.
Oh, so to be fair, all right. So then, of course, what happens is after that, Shazam, which Peter Safran, they asked Peter Safran if he wants to produce because Walter Hamada's got his neck stretched. So then Peter Safran comes in the fold and he produces Shazam. He produces like a couple of other movies. He doesn't produce, like Walter Hamada's overseeing every project. So Shazam comes out, does well, and they're excited. And then of course, Wonder Woman come out in 2017 was a huge success. So then of course, the only thing the issue they have though is then of course after Shazam was the last successful movie they had made, because in 2020 happened and we got Birds of Prey comes out, flops. Also, by the way, David Ayer's Suicide Squad came out in 2016, but then they did the same thing they did to Justice League. They did to Suicide Squad. They got a trailer park company to oversee that movie, the 2016 Suicide Squad, and recut the whole movie. And David Ayer said, that's not my movie. They took my movie from me and said it's too dark. And then they recut the movie and then just released it as a soundtrack movie.
Yeah, watch that Comic-Con trailer. Remember that Comic-Con trailer? That was a really dark trailer that I was looking forward to. Where was that movie?
Yeah.
Also, they needed to sandwich in needle drops. Like
they still were going to have Enchantress as the main villain, but originally, if he had his way, he would have. Yeah, but if he had his way of that movie, he even admit that a while ago that he would have had the Joker as the main villain in Suicide Squad. Yeah, if he had his way.
I'm sorry, I got to switch this. Okay, so Walter Hamada So Walter Hamada, he basically, of course, and then of course he oversees the Aquaman and then of course Shazam, and then of course after Shazam comes on as well.
What about Wonder Woman? Because Wonder Woman came out in 2017.
He did not oversee that. No, that
he didn't oversee that one.
That was Jeff Johns and John Berg.
Yeah.
They oversaw that. Which Zack Snyder mostly was a producer on that one. That was mostly Snyder that was a producer, but then he was like, but mostly he let Patty Jenkins do everything, but Jeff Johns and Peter Berg oversaw it mostly over production on that movie, while Snyder worked on Justice League. So really, it was mostly Jeff Johns and Peter Berg that were on that one. But I will say, Hamada, he basically oversaw every flop basically for DC. Like he had 2 successes, and then the rest were just like.
A 2
like Shazam underperformed. It did well critically, but it didn't make as much money that they were hoping for.
$350 million.
Yeah, it underperformed. It was an underperformed, and then it really became
Then the second, but then when it comes around to the second one really underperformed.
That flopped. It didn't even pass the fucking 200 million.
Of course, Birds of Prey comes out. Birds of Prey comes out and it flops. It gets terrible reviews. Then, of course, people are like, oh, well, that's just nobody wants a female-led movie. And then, of course, Wonder Woman comes out the following year, at the end of the year, and then the pandemic hits, which I will say the pandemic mostly killed it, but it got terrible reviews as well. It got terrible.
Well, Birds of Prey didn't have the terrible reviews. It was sitting around at 75% on Rotten Tomatoes. It had decent reviews, but no one saw it. It was because people did not.
I don't hate it. I actually liked it. I actually thought
it was fine, and they also wanted it to be an R-rated movie.
Like, honestly, my uncle, who hated the trailer, said, I actually enjoyed it. Like that scene where they're playing Hit Me With Your Best Shot and everybody's getting ready and you see Black Mask where he's looking at that mask he's about to put on. I'm like, that's a cool shot.
They thought that and also the title was terrible. They should have called it Birds of Prey and Harley Quinn.
They retitled the movie before opening weekend because when they get, they said they called it Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey. And if you went to the theater, they just retitled had a piece of paper that put Harley Quinn.
And you brought in these unknown characters from DC that no one's heard of. And it just did not do well.
Well, there was some controversy behind the scenes because apparently this was actually true. Like there was apparently people were test audiences were angry about the movie because apparently they said it was child pornography, or people were complaining about saying that because they said there was a subplot where Roman, instead of having the serial numbers, he had a naked picture of himself in the diamond, and then the little girl swallows it, and they're like, she's swallowing a picture of a naked man in a diamond. And they're like, that's not, the director had to defend it, saying it was just, he was self-conflicted. Like he looked at himself like emasculated. And so but then after the reshoots, they put the serial numbers in and they said, which people, that's a Grace Randolph got her ass chewed out because she was the one that leaked the plot about saying, oh, she swallowed Roman Cyrus's dick pics. And then
Grace Randolph being wrong about something, give me a second to process the
She called her out. The director called her out saying, people like you are the reason, you're a scum of villainy of the journalist. Because you're the reason why we had to do this shit, because we had to reshoot the movie because of people like you. And which I'm like, I will say, in Grace's defense, it's kind of weird that really, why would you have a naked statue of a dude in a diamond? First off, regardless of someone swallowing the diamond, why would you it made more sense in the theatrical cut of them just having serial numbers. So what happens is that movie comes out and flops. Then Wonder Woman comes out and flops. Then 2021, they're like, all right. AT&T is like, because, by that point, AT&T.
But also with Wonder Woman 84, when that came out at the end of the year, it was coming out in that day-to-day release on streaming on HBO Max. And it was during at the end of the year of the holiday, and it tanked because they put it out on the same day on the streaming, and it was the dumbest decision that WB has ever done because we were living in the pandemic world where now they were putting out more movies on streaming a lot sooner after its theatrical run. Then WB suddenly came up with a stupid fucking idea to come out on the same day as theaters. AT&T. Yeah, AT&T. Like, what the fuck were you thinking? That's like the killing of cinema.
And you know what they did? Every single movie flopped in theaters because of that. Every single movie. Except for
and it was in the new normal. It was the new norm now.
There were only 3 movies that did not flop. 3 movies. Can you guess what those 3 movies are?
Yeah, Godzilla versus Kong, Mortal Kombat, and I believe what was the third one? Oh, fuck, now I can't.
Starts with a D. Timothy Chalamet.
Oh, yeah, no, Doom. Doom Part 1. Yep. Yeah, Doom Part 1.
Only 3 movies that didn't flop. Every single movie. Suicide Squad flopped. Matrix flopped. In fact, they got sued by the Matrix company because of that, saying, You fucked us, and you didn't tell
Yeah.
us. Legendary was going to sue them, but they paid Legendary off.
Even Nolan got fucked too. Nolan got screwed.
Yes, everybody got done.
He did not want to put out, and also when the theaters were starting to reopen, he did not want to open that Tenet movie in theaters. They're like, no, we should wait. We should wait till everybody gets close to getting back to the theaters because you're starting to reopen because you closed the theater for 6 to 7 months, and he got screwed over. He did it. They opened that theater without his permission.
Which, of course, and you know what the sad thing is? The only two movies they didn't screw over were the Batman and Harry Potter. They pushed those movies to 2022 because they're like, oh, we don't want our two biggest franchises to get fucked.
But also, that's another movie that came out in the day-to-day streaming. The Batman.
The Batman didn't come out day-to-day. The Batman came out.
It did. No. Actually, yeah. Wait. No, you're right. You're right. It was weeks later.
But they pushed it to 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah, they pushed that in the Fantastic Beasts 3 because they said they didn't want to they didn't want to fuck over their golden child.
Yeah.
Basically. To which, and then of course James Gunn's Suicide Squad movie comes out, which thank God he got to make Peacemaker before that movie came out, because I don't think he would have got to make Peacemaker because AT&T fucked him. But then, of course,
that's another movie that came out of
day-to-day. It got great reception. It got a great reception, but it just didn't have a box office because no movie did. And I hate when people try to use that against James Gunn. He made one big flop, and I'm like, if every movie they made that year flopped, AT&T had to get sold because they had a.
It was in a different circumstances. That's like, if you understand the circumstances of the Suicide Squad, it was well received by critics, but unfortunately, it flopped because it was on a day-to-day fucking streaming.
Peacemaker was big too. Peacemaker was a big streaming.
Peacemaker was a big hit on HBO Max when that hit when this first season.
For some reason, it wasn't as big as Just Like That, though. Sex and the City apparently was the biggest one when it launched.
Yeah, that's true.
That is the weirdest thing, too. That made more viewership than anything.
But also during the pandemic, back in like early 2020, I think it was back in early 2020, when Zack Snyder did his several year anniversary of Man of Steel, and he did a watch party on his Vero account. And then Henry Cavill popped up, and then he were interacting with the fans. Then he announced that he was going to release the Snyder Cut on HBO Max, cool, because the HBO Max was still in their early days of streaming. They needed a big subscribers, so they thought, hey, let's give what the fans want. Fans have been asking for years to see the Snyder Cut, to see it restored and see it in its final form.
So of course, Walter Hamada, after the string of flops and AT&T gets sold, Discovery gets taken over by AT&T. AT&T gets taken over by Discovery. And of course, AT&T, so then of course, now it's owned by Discovery. And so of course, they say, all right, we want to basically hit the reset button and try to start a new universe because we feel like it's discluded. And then comes in these guys right here, James Gunn and Peter Safran, to which they basically say, hey, look, okay, because yes, at first they were like, because it was so everybody like, there was so like Superman wasn't even, and it was an afterthought in this universe. Walter Hamada said, I really don't want to focus on Superman. I want to focus more on anything else. And so kind of that, and then of course, Black Adam comes out, and Walter Hamada finally, like, he didn't even want to put Black Adam, by the way, Superman and Black Adam. The Rock forced WB to put,
Yeah, he's been begging for years for WB to have Superman back. Henry Cavill. He wanted Henry Cavill to come back.
God bless his soul, to try and take over DC, and it failed miserably. So much so that he's like, I'm going back to the WWE, and I'm going to take that over, which that
I know.
Well, he did say the DC universe is about to change. Well, it did.
Yes, but not with you.
He was right about one.
But not with you. Yeah, but he's been fighting for years to get like Henry Cavill Superman back into the big screen because they sidelined him after the fallout of Justice League and that BVS, and that WB thought that he's not the most valuable character as he used to until they put him back on television.
They were going to make a Superman. They were going to make a Black Superman movie that wasn't even going to have Kal-El.
They still trying to get that shit in development with the Black Superman story with J.J. Abrams.
And I mean, I'm like,
which I still don't even think that movie's even going to get.
I don't think it is either. I mean,
I think they're just going to scrap that project and act like nothing happened.
With this regime, it's probably dead.
Yeah, they just want to focus more on putting Superman back in the silver screen and win over the audience.
Which
I feel like with Gunn and Safran, we're fully back to basics mode. Like Superman is the very first thing that they're going to do, and then everything going forward, they're going to base off of that.
But also, they already have a few projects already being filmed right now with Lanterns and Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow.
And
And
here's
they're
the
very
problem.
confident, and they've already finished the season 2 of Peacemaker, and that's supposed to come out like a month after Superman.
Now,
Yeah.
before we dive fully into Gunn, I want to say Hamada. The only thing I feel like his biggest issues was, one, he was against the Joker movie being happened. In fact, Todd Phillips pitched the movie to him. He said no. He says, I don't think it'd work commercially. And then he went over his head and went straight to the studio to the head of the studio at the time. I forget his name. Was something with a psychic daughter. Toby Emmerich. Toby Emmerich. Yeah, Toby.
Yeah, Toby Emmerich. Yeah.
Yeah, who has the psychic daughter. Yeah. Have you seen what he says in the magazine for Entertainment Weekly for the Comic-Con issue of Aquaman? He said that my daughter can foreshadow, has psychic powers where she can see when movies are going to do well or bad. And she said Aquaman's going to be a big hit. And I'm just thinking,
what do you an AI generated AI fucking brain that you can see the algorithm coming from a mile away?
Well, why didn't your daughter see the pandemic, motherfucker? That's what I want to say.
The year must have predicting pre-pandemic world.
We could have stopped y'all from making that bad decision with AT&T where the day and date release. And you were like, she said, Dad, I see all your movies flopping in 2020 for some reason. For 2021, I see every single movie except for 3 movies. I was like, I mean, that made me like, okay, now you sound crazy. Like, but yeah. So of course, Walter Hamada was against that. And he was also against, he did not want a Superman movie. In fact, he did not like Henry Cavill as Superman. And in fact, he's the reason why he said, in fact, it wasn't until The Rock. And in fact, he was not even going to produce, like before James Gunn jumped on board. Because James Gunn, they already were wanting to work with James Gunn. They told James Gunn was working on a Superman movie himself that was not going to be connected to DC. That was what this movie is. And then, of course, Walter Hamada said they were going to make a Superman movie. They were going to make 3 Superman projects, by the way. I just want to point out. They were going to make
they had the one with the Black Superman story with J.J. Abrams, and then 2 they had with Michael B. Jordan where they were working on the HBO series, I believe, a Max series called Val Zod's Superman. Michael B. Jordan's like passion project. Then, like you said, like James Gunn's Superman idea. At first, when Warner Brothers, they approached him after the success of, no, not the success, but during the time when he was making Suicide Squad, they were like, hey, would you be interested? Would you be interested in taking over DC? And he said no, because he would not be able to be a great studio head. And until Peter Safran was going to tell him that he's going to be the one partnering with him to be the studio head at WB, the studio head for DC. And you're like, you know what? I want him. We're close friends. I trust him to be the studio head for production, and I can take control over creative.
And the problem with, which the thing is, okay, so, and Henry Cavill, it was a rumor, but this was a rumor, and even Henry Cavill says it's not true, that, they were going to make a Superman sequel that Henry Cavill was going to star and Charles Roven was going to produce, and I'm like, that, even they said, that's not true. They even debunked that. It was like someone like from like Screen Rant or somebody from that website said that was like, that's not true. But basically, they were ideas talking about doing another Superman movie with Henry Cavill when The Rock, before Black Adam came out. But when Black Adam came out, flopped. That idea, and then James Gunn took over the next month. Then James Gunn says, I really just want to reboot the universe and start a new Superman, new Batman.
Kind of like with Matt Reeves' Batman. Remember that circumstances when originally he was supposed to direct the Batman movie with Ben Affleck's script, and Ben Affleck was going to be the lead character. And after that fell apart, he walked away from that project. And he said, and I feel like that Matt Reeves didn't really know how to tackle this version of Batman for Ben Affleck. He wanted to do his own version, his own vision, and reboot the whole thing. And this was like after the fallout with Black Adam, it was Warner Brothers are starting to see that the casual movie going audience have given up on this DCEU. They've given up. People are tapping out. So we have to reboot it. We have to start from scratch and get back to the drawing board.
James Gunn has said the only thing that's canon right now is the Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, Blue Beetle,
and Well, Beetle was canon.
The actor is canon, but not
the actor. Yeah, the character will that we know now that he will have an animated series coming up. That will be canon. But the only thing that was truly canon is Suicide Squad and Peacemaker season 1, minus that whole Justice League canon, that never happened.
And I will say, all right, so I'm going to tell you before we're going to dive into Snyder versus Gunn shit, we're going to talk one thing about, okay, I'm going to talk about my negatives real quick about Gunn. My only negative about him is I feel like we don't have a Wonder Woman slate. We don't have any Wonder Woman. slate. And I feel like one thing a lot of people are saying, I've noticed this online, is like, hey, he's not announcing any big projects. He's always announcing projects that aren't really big. Like, for instance, we're making a Sergeant Rock movie, which I'm like, who the fuck cares about a Sergeant Rock movie? And also he's announcing, like, then you're making a movie like, a Clayface movie. And you're like, but to be fair, in his defense, he said whatever script is ready, that's the script they're going to shoot. Which, that's not a bad idea, but at the same time, it's like, are you sure you're going to shoot? What if that's a bad analogy? Because if you make this movie and it flops, then these ideas are bad, because guess what? Yeah, the movies come out, but if they don't make any money, especially like if you say, hey, I'm going to make a Wonder Woman movie versus a Clayface movie, who's more likely to go watch a Clayface movie or a Wonder Woman movie?
But in his defense, for this big start, they need Superman to be really fucking good. They need it to be fucking great to win over the casual movie-going audience and set up for what this DC universe is going to be before they put out any like unknown projects. If this movie's great, people will be excited for another DC project like Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, which are already in, like midway through production.
Yeah.
And what else? Like Lantern series. They need to be
excited
hitting
about
out of the park.
I'm
And
so
if they hit
excited.
their mark, and people will be willing to come back to watch these movies, even if it's an unknown character. Like, for instance, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. This was during the time when they were firing on all
No one gave a
cylinders
shit
for the
about
MCU
it.
movie. Nobody gave a fuck about the Guardians. Nobody gave a fuck. But they were willing to be
Some-
open to it because Marvel was hitting it out of the park with their success, quality and financially. But now, during this time, they need to win the audience over with Superman.
I will say, all right, so now we're about to jump on Snyder versus Gunn. All right, we're going to talk about it. Yes, we're going to talk about it. Yes, you want to know all about, okay, this release the Snyder cut, the sell the Snyderverse and Netflix garbage. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Gunn, like, fire James Gunn, Peter Safran. We're about to talk about that right now. And
What about the firing
of
of Henry Cavill? Like, James Gunn fired Henry Cavill.
To be fair, okay, let's say they're right. Yeah, you're right. He fired, guess what? They fired Tobey Maguire from Spider-Man 4, and then they hired Andrew Garfield. They fired Andrew Garfield, which, to be fair, Andrew Garfield kind of deserved to be fired because he kind of fucked over Sony by that not going to the press conference. But still, they fired. They also, guess what? James Bond. Pierce Brosnan got fucked over by MGM because they saw Batman Begins and said, "Hey, we want to make a rebooted Bond film." So I mean, like by hiring Daniel Craig. So I mean, and guess what? You want to talk about Superman's being fucked over? Brandon Routh got fucked over by Christopher Nolan for Henry Cavill. So really, that's kind
Brandon Routh got the shaft. He never got his franchise.
Yeah,
Never.
he said they waited until his contract expired to fire him.
That's true.
So really, that's poetic justice, if you ask me. Even though it's not Henry's fault, to be fair. But I'm just saying, like,
but even though I love Henry Cavill's Superman, but I feel like he deserved better. He deserved to have his own solo movie, his own trilogy, and he got fucked by WB.
I want to play devil's advocate and say I think he got 3 movies. Okay, and
He sort of did, but he wasn't really present in Justice League this much.
If you squint, sure, but it's like if you squint.
I mean, he's got 3 movies, and he's
Dude,
got
Ben Affleck had more present in the DC movies more than Superman.
True.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Affleck's got 2 movies and like 1 cameo.
Yeah, but he had a bigger part in BVS. He had a bigger part in Zack Snyder's Justice League. He even had a bigger part, even for a cameo in the fucking Flash movie, for crying out loud. That tells you something. That they did not care for Henry Cavill's Superman, and even the audience at the time were very divisive for Henry Cavill's portrayal. So they're gonna like, you know what, fuck that. We're not gonna have him be a valuable character anymore.
Let's talk about the Snyderverse, people. Like, people are like, they keep online to tweet. Like, I saw someone in my feed there earlier, and I'm not gonna say his name because I'm not trying to call him out or nothing.
Yeah.
But you know who I'm talking about. Like, I was telling you about this person who was just basically like, "Oh, your shills. Oh, the trailers. If you watch they put out a thing saying like, okay, I'm not gonna say the person's name. I'm not, but I'm just gonna say this person. Let's call him Roger. That's not his name.
Let's call him Bob.
Bob. We'll call him Bob. Okay, Bob. Let's say Bob. Okay, is saying that. Oh, if you watch a trailer, if you click on it, don't even watch it. Just click on it. Or if it's an ad, that counts as a view. When in reality, it doesn't. You actually have to watch 30 seconds. Even if you look it up, Google will even tell you 30. You have to at least consume 30 seconds of it, and if it's an ad, for instance, that says skip ad, it's not going to count. You actually have to watch it. An ad version doesn't even count. So to be fair, Bob, you're not right on that. And also, they count views within 30 seconds. So you have to search this out, watch it, and then watch 30 seconds of it, just like a streaming model. Because guess what? If that was the case, Venom: The Last Dance would be the highest grossing freaking trailer of all time. You know, I'm just saying, if that's how it worked, they would, because you don't think studios would abuse the system, they would abuse it like hell. In fact, YouTube, you could actually do that. Well, you could actually, back in like 2014, 2015, you could actually go on a video and it would count as a view. But then people like Mr. Beast and stuff would abuse the system and try to do that. So that's when YouTube's changed their guidelines, because they're like, hey, we're not doing that, even for studios, because people try to abuse the system. And guess what? You can't abuse the system anymore. And so you can't add that. And also, I want to point out what Bob said. Bob also said that if you Google if Superman trends, the word Superman trends, it's referring to just the character in general, and that's why James Gunn trended it, so that way people with fake engagements. And I'm like, it was called Superman Legacy for years. For like the last 2 years, he changed the title last year. It was for like 2 years called Superman Legacy. And Superman Legacy trended pretty well. Okay, like, I mean, look, I don't screenshots, but I mean, I saw it trending a lot. And I will say, one thing is, I think really people are just dogging on James Gunn because they really, really want, James Gunn to
they want to restore the Snyderverse. They want to continue on with Justice League 2 and 3.
It doesn't work that way. I mean,
they're butthurt about it.
It doesn't work.
I mean, I will admit, back in the day when the Snyder Cut came out, I was willing to be one of those people, restore the Snyderverse. I want to see the continued story, blah, blah, blah. And this was before James Gunn took over DC. And even though I was heartbroken about that we're not going to see Henry or Ben continue to play Batman and Superman, I was willing to accept it. Like, if this is not winning over everybody, I feel like we got to start from scratch and go back to the drawing board and just reboot it and hope for the best. And that's what I'm hoping for the best.
Yeah. And I just want to point out, I love Man of Steel. Man of Steel is a dope movie. And
it's a masterpiece. It's the best Superman they've made.
Batman vs Superman. I don't hate Batman vs Superman, but there are things I do love. Like, I love the fight scene between Superman and Doomsday and the fight scene between Batman and Superman. I thought that was
that was awesome.
And
some people were very disappointed by that fight.
I loved it. And then on top of that, the fight scenes at the end of Wonder Woman where Superman sacrificed himself, that's a cool scene. And then even in Justice League, his version of Justice League, the scene where they all die at the end and then the Flash reverses time and saves them.
That was the best part of that movie. That shit was the best part of that film.
And then when Wonder Woman cutting off Steppenwolf's head and Darkseid sees that is so cool.
Dude, did you watch that Leslie Jones doing a commentary and tried to make fun of it? Dude, that was fun. Dude, her doing a commentary made that film even better. Made me die laughing when she was doing a commentary on the Snyder Cut.
What I want to get at is I just think that, one, Zack Snyder is not going to restore that. They're not going to restore that. You know what? Like, I saw a picture of a dude just sitting outside of Netflix where they sell the Snyderverse to Netflix. And I'm just thinking, even James Gunn finally responded to that. I'm glad the other day
this was back in 2023 when you showed it to me on DM when he was responding that he has no interest in like doing it for Netflix. First of all, Snyder does not own the rights to those characters. WB has those rights. It's theirs. You cannot sell that shit to Netflix. That's not how it works.
And also, Ben Affleck even said he doesn't. He says, I'm done playing that character. In fact, he said today in an article, someone asked him about it. He says, yeah, I played it too dark.
But to be fair, there's many times an occasion where he was done until he came back for the additional photography. Then he came back to cameo in the Flash movie. So there were many times where he was done. But I understand it right now that, he's officially done right now. They're never going to
that's an actor for you. They'll say, I'm now like Star Wars. Remember when Carrie Fisher goes, Star Wars ruined my life. I'm never coming back. And then she's in Force Awakens, Last Jedi.
Yeah.
I'm just like, so it's like, that's actors for you. They'll say all this shit for like clickbait. Then the next month when they're offered a new role, they're like, all right, you know what? I'm coming back. It's like there's only a couple of actors I've ever seen that stood their ground.
I mean, I was at the time when Black Adam came out, when Henry Cavill, at the time we thought that he was actually back to Superman, because literally, this is no joke. You can look up on Instagram, on his Instagram page, that he literally announced like, I'm officially back as Superman. Until he wasn't, which that kind of broke my heart at the time. I was like, oh my God, you just misled us. I was happy, and now you just pulled a 180. It's not his fault. It's not Henry Cavill's fault. I'm not blaming him. I'm blaming the studio for pulling that shit and threw him under the bus.
Now, let me ask you this, guys. Do you think that James Gunn sabotaged the all the later movies that came out that year of 2023, like The Flash,
No.
No,
Blue
He had
Beetle?
even if
nothing
he
to do with
wanted
that.
to, even if he wanted to legally, he couldn't.
Yeah,
Well-
those were done under the different banner with Walter Hamada and fucking Kevin Tsujihara when they were fucking doing those last remaining DC movies that had nothing to do with James Gunn. And people always say, "Oh, he had something to do with the reshoots of the Flash movie." No, he wasn't. He was not involved in it. Stop
Well,
trying to fucking.
he did say, to be fair, he did say in an interview he did add Clooney. He thought the idea of Clooney being in the movie was funny. So he said he removed Michael Keaton because he didn't want to give fans false hope that Michael Keaton's coming back.
Well, yeah, that's the whole point of it. Like adding Clooney in it. Originally, they wanted to get Bale. They wanted to get Christian Bale, but
He
Christian
said
Bale
no.
said, "Like, hey, I'm not coming back if Nolan's not involved." That he made that very clear from the start. And,
To which-
they wanted to get Bale back, but then they had Clooney.
Which I thought that's still the funniest joke ever.
It was supposed to be for a joke. I don't think he really was taking that shit seriously. But also, they
It was-
wanted to say, "Hey,
it was
we're done.
Nice.
We're
It was
moving on."
nice that- It was nice that they gave noted tequila salesman George Clooney a payday.
They had three different endings of that Flash movie. Three
Yeah.
different endings.
And you know what? And I think every movie, which to be fair, The Flash did not flop. The Flash flopped because the movie had problems from the get-go. One was the writer's strike. Two,
Yeah.
it was literally your star is committing felonies every freaking day.
There was many drama going around too off screen.
Those are people. There's people on Twitter.
And
right
people
now.
were, and at the time, did not give a shit about the Flash movie because they gave up on the DCEU. And when Shazam: The Fury of the Gods that came out and it had nothing to do with any of the controversy, the movie still tanked. No one saw that movie.
Yeah, and also people act like, oh, if Henry Cavill's back as Superman, it made billions. I'm like, he was in Black
No.
Adam, and it did not
He
make
made a
him-
cameo on Black Adam, and no one cheered when he showed up. No one fucking
They
cheered
were
when
telling
that appeared.
people he's in the movie, and people still like, fuck, I don't
like-
care.
It's like you're doing the 7 stages of grief with these people.
I mean, seriously. And here's the thing, okay? I'm just gonna say it. Yes, all those movies flopped because nobody gave a shit about DC. I mean, literally, Blue Beetle flopped because no one really even knew like it was what it was.
It was
And now
unknown, and also they had bad baggage. It had too many bad baggage, and it was the bad time to put that out. They
Aquaman-
originally they wanted this to be an HBO Max movie for Blue Beetle before they went to the theatrical release.
they reshot Aquaman 3 times.
Oh yeah, they had so many fucking reshoots. And
The
somebody's like,
movie cost
James Gunn did the
400
reshoots
million,
about.
and it made 400 million.
And first of all, James Gunn was not hands on of the reshoots. He had nothing to do with those reshoots.
Yeah, that movie, they lost money on Aquaman because that movie.
Well,
cost
no,
400 million.
it actually made more. It actually performed not as much as what the first one did, but it made at least 400 million.
They
And
broke
it
even,
made it broke even more than what these other DC movies have done.
It was the most successful, which, to be fair, and I think James Gunn, like literally, I don't blame him at all, but and also Penguin, DC has only had 2 successes, which within that year is the Batman, and they've had what's it called, Peacemaker, and
Yeah, Peacemaker and then the Penguin
Penguin.
series. Well, it was more of a safe bet. If they made a Peacemaker movie, it would have flopped, and even
Yeah.
the Penguin would not have done as well as the Batman. But it did well because it was on an HBO series, and it got so
Yeah,
much
pretty
Emmy
sure-
nominations, have won so many awards for Colin Farrell for the Penguin show. It blew it way out of the water.
which and also that Superman the Christopher Reeve documentary was so well loved. People are like, oh, that documentary is a flop. I'm like, they put it in limited release first off.
Yeah,
and
it was at a Fathom
yeah.
event.
It got, and then of course more people wanted the show, so they put it nationwide, and nobody really watched it nationwide. They're like, it was just more of like a Fathom event thing where it's like they bet too much on their horse because because the horse was getting a lot of buzz, and then whenever after but I don't blame which it did really well on Max, and guess what? I loved it. I thought I cried.
Yeah, it was.
That
Dude, you
documentary
did not
was
like.
awesome.
If you did not like the documentary, you have no soul. Because
Yeah.
that documentary was so heartbreaking, uplifting, and emotional to watch that story behind the scenes with Christopher Reeve, and especially with Robin Williams, who was close to Christopher Reeve, which I had no idea, no knowledge of that at the time until I saw that documentary. And in my
I
opinion,
swear.
it should have got a nomination for best
You're gonna say
documentary
Ryan?
on the Oscars. I feel like that
That's-
got snubbed.
I swear, we're like gonna be entering like a Black Sabbath situation where it's like when Ozzy Osbourne left the band and then Ronnie James Dio took over, and it's like they're gonna be Ozzy fans and Dio fans, and they're just never gonna get along.
Yeah,
Right.
like I just think one thing like Creature Commandos, they're bashing Creature Commandos because they're like, oh, Creature Commandos is James Gunn's greenlighting his own show, and I'm like, do you motherfuckers know how that works? Do you think James Gunn can just go up there and greenlight his own show? Do you really think that works? He's not the head of the network, okay? He can't go up there and say,
he can't.
Yo, Casey Boyens, who is actually the head of who actually is the head
because
of
the network has to be the one give the go ahead of the
Casey Boyens is the one that looks at the ratings. And guess what? Max does not release their ratings. Okay? No one knows the ratings.
No,
and
they
so
don't.
Guess what? Casey Boyens is the only one that saw the number and says, hey, it's he could have said, you know what? It did okay. And which people go by like the streaming numbers of like, oh, well, we go by the Nielsen charts. And I'm like, the Nielsen charts do not show all the ratings. They only show what is streamed on like certain things. Like they do not show everything. Okay, so the Nielsen charts are not accurate. Okay, because guess what? The Penguin was a huge success, and it was nowhere near the Nielsen charts.
Right. Yeah. You know? And also, yeah, they greenlit season 2 of Creature Commandos as they were still going when that first season was still going on HBO on the Max series. Yeah, and James it was successful.
But the show's totally in danger, you guys.
It's like it flopped. Okay, if it flopped, then why is it getting season 2? Please, where's the fucking logic in that? Where's the logic?
Yeah. Also, you think that's also guess what? So then, because what would happen if James Gunn, if the show didn't do well and it flopped, then guess what? James Gunn, there wouldn't be a season 2 because if James Gunn greenlit and say, hey, I'm going to greenlit my own show. Okay, let's just say he had the power. He doesn't. But let's say he had the power to do that. Mm-hmm. Then guess what? You don't think people would ask questions like why? Oh, well, then so if say for instance the Dune show does the same rating numbers as Creature Commandos, then they'd say, oh well, then I just heard James Gunn greenlit his own show. I want to greenlit my own show season 2. Then it would be the same argument because then people would be like, hey, it'd be like just anarchy and chaos.
3 words.
That's true.
Conflict of interest.
If he gets up, we all get up. It'd be anarchy.
I mean, to be fair, I think that's really what people like these, especially a lot of these people are just internet trolls. They're really no people. A lot of these are bots. In fact, a lot of the Snyder Cut movement was bots. Did you know that they actually?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were. They were bots. There's no doubt about it.
There's even look. I don't know if this is true or not. I know a lot of people like the actual trades like Variety and stuff said that that they believe this is actually. You can go look this up. This is in the trades. Variety and Dead Hollywood Reporter reported this. That a lot of the bots were paid for by a company that has connections to Zack Snyder. To which
don't you find that suspicious?
To which that's what the trades reported that it was a company with connections to a Zack Snyder's company, and so they were just like for the release of Snyder's stuff. So I'm not saying Zack Snyder does, but I'm just saying they suspect that Zack Snyder paid bots, paid for people to create bots to do that on social media, to like tweet out, release the Snyder Cut, to make all this engagement. That's what they're saying. They 100% say that, but that's what they're applying. And so, because they don't want Zack Snyder to sue them, because then Zack Snyder says, I don't know what you're talking about. The funny part is Zack Snyder never denied it either. He never said, yeah, that's true, or that's bullshit. He just like anytime someone asked him about it, he just dodged the question. So that kind of made me like, oh, I was like,
little suspicious.
It is, but I'm just saying. But the funny thing is, someone says DC fans someone shared an image one time that says DC fans on the internet, woohoo! DC fans in reality at the theaters, and it's just an empty theater. That's kind of DC fans, okay? It's like, yeah. But here's the thing: Superman did really well in the trailers. It was one of the biggest trailers of all time. Okay, it
made it to the top 5.
And guess what? You can't do that if you just click on and spam it. Okay, you can't.
No.
Yeah. Okay, there's no way you can do it. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. That is the facts. That is literally on YouTube's policy. You cannot go up there and just. I can't go up there and make my videos like popular. I could. Now you could possibly. It's possible that James Gunn could get a bunch of people to create a bunch of bots. But then I even think they have policies against that too. So if James Gunn and Warner Bros. Did hire, which I don't want to try to give them jet fuel now, but like if you say, for instance, let's say James Gunn hired a bunch of bots. Went out there and said, hey, watch the Superman trailer 30 times, to make it popular. I don't think that you can do that. I don't know. I mean, maybe. But I don't think – but that'd be a really big stretch of James Gunn going out of his way, hiring a bunch of people in China to watch the trailer 30 times. Even though also I think the studio – YouTube will be aware of this because, hey, how come all these bots are coming from China? Like, why are they watching this trailer? And I think that right there would probably. But yeah, I think honestly, people were just excited because I even seen YouTube channels that talk about politics all the time that have never talked about a comic book movie or anything. They're like, I'm gonna watch the Superman trailer, and I'm just like, because I'm like,
that
even
tells
like,
you something. That tells you something. There's hype for this movie. People are ready to get back to seeing this version of Superman, but they want it to be more of the comic book accurate Superman. And there are people, there's some lot of fucking dumbass content creators out there who are just begging on James Gunn, and they really want this to fail. They'll say anything negative, even if the trailer looks great. They'll say anything negative because they want this to fucking flop.
Certain channels that shall remain nameless, but one of them rhymes with turd-rotic, are really hedging their bets on this being bad so they can say it's woke for about 6 months.
Yeah, for those fucking anti-woke content creators that want to fucking beg on this movie.
Well,
Even though they were so, and there are a lot of people out there that fucking shit on the set photos of that was shown online of Danny Corn Sweat's Superman. Oh, the suit sucks. This movie's gonna suck.
but you know what? Look, here's the thing: you have not seen it. You saw it in a trailer or like, but I will say this though: there's one thing I'm going to agree with them on is where's the freaking marketing for this movie? Because the movie literally is like coming out in July, and there's only been one trailer. There hasn't been much marketing. Usually, they should be on their third trailer by now. And
they're gonna drop it very soon because it's around that CinemaCon too.
It's almost
CinemaCon, they're focusing strictly like marketing, and also they recently announced that there's going to be a 5-minute exclusive for Superman that's going to be shown in Thailand, and it's going to be playing in front of the Minecraft movie.
Oh, fuck me.
Yeah.
Minecraft movie? You think that's going to be like...
Well, here's the Minecraft is under the banner with
Why
WB.
not Sinners? Why not Sinners? Sinners is more the...
Sinners is an R-rated movie that not everybody's going to go out and see.
No one's gonna
Minecraft is
watch
the only
Minecraft.
even have the best... Even if the movie sucks, they're still going to have more people...
Right.
They're going to take
Out
their
of us
families to see
three.
Minecraft over fucking Sinners.
Are any of you guys excited for Minecraft? Right now, raise your hand if you're excited.
Nobody is.
for Minecraft.
Nobody is.
It's no longer 2012, Jacob.
This is like the Lego movie all over again. I mean, hopefully, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Minecraft movie will be a big.
Hey, the Lego
billion-dollar
movie was actually great.
Yeah,
The
Lego
was
was
actually turned out to
fantastic.
be a banger.
But
It
I
was
have
a
not-
stupid. Dude, I would be so shocked if Minecraft actually is a good movie, and I have no hype for it. I'm with you. It looks fucking terrible. But if that movie ends up being better than I thought it would be, holy shit! I cannot believe it. This is actually pretty good.
So,
And then the good marketing strategy is to put a brand new trailer or a 2-minute clip in front of Minecraft. Even if you're not looking forward to it, I think it's a smart strategy move because Minecraft is going to appeal to more for family and kids, and they wanted to, and they're not. And the reason why why you were asking that why they put it in front of Sinners, and I mentioned this before that it's an R-rated movie. It's an adult fucking movie. I don't think they're going to take their family to see a fucking bloody gore vampire film.
well, good
Yeah,
points, Will.
Mom, let's go see the movie.
Hey,
where
mommy,
Haley
can you take me to
Steinfeld-
see a vampire movie?
Where
Hey, you know
Haley
what?
Steinfeld
I went-
sucks blood.
You know what? I went and saw Scream 4 when I was like 10. Was like 10 or 11. Okay, they can handle it.
And
That's-
you're the way you are today, and that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense to me.
Hey, the
Yeah,
first
makes
movie I
sense.
saw when I was a kid. The first movie I saw when I was a kid was Fright Night. So I was
Hey,
like,
they were able to get away with the Deadpool movies because it's not a dark and gritty movie and it's a superhero film, and they were able to get away with it.
So I will say on our final thoughts. I will say, wrapping up our final thoughts, I will say, I really wish James Gunn the best because James Gunn right now, I read the other day that a lot of his writing on this movie, like the fate of Warner Brothers is writing on this movie because this movie flops. Warner Brothers is getting sold again.
Yep. And it's also the pressure is going to be on James Gunn. He's going to be under shitload of pressure for Superman, especially him being the head of DC.
Like honestly, this movie, I think it could make $1 billion. I mean, I know I'm going to sound crazy saying it.
If the movie turns out to be great, if the quality is great, then yeah, it has a potential to make $1 billion. But I don't think that they're going to expect this to be $1 billion hit. They're just hoping that it's going to break even and it does well. But they are hoping that this movie is actually good and it wins over a lot of people, and that way it will push forward. That way, if they make another Superman movie, more people are gonna go out and see it, and it's gonna make more money than the first film did because people love what they did with the first movie.
I will say that I really, truly am very I'm very hopeful for James Gunn. I'm gonna tell you right now, I love I really like his 3 movies he's made in DC so far. His 3 projects, I love. Look, out of Guardians movies, if you put Guardians of the Galaxy 1 through 3 in front of me versus his Suicide Squad movies, I'm watching Suicide Squad all the day long because I loved his Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, and Creature Commandos. I wasn't a big fan of how the Creature Commandos ended, but I really enjoyed the whole season. And I really like Peacemaker is amazing, and I can't wait.
Yeah, that was a banger show. Like I love that fucking show. And that was another DC character that no one gave a shit about Peacemaker before this. Nobody knew anything about it. Like you were saying about Sergeant Rock, like why anybody give a fuck about Sergeant Rock? Well, if this movie like Superman is succeeding, then more people will be open to watching that movie. If those movies are banger after banger after banger, it's like a pattern that they need to make and to win over the audience. And I'm a big James Gunn fan. I love what he did with the Guardians movies. I love what he did with Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. He is, because every time you see him in an interview, he is very passionate fan. He's not just a filmmaker or a storyteller. He is a fucking nerd, a comic book nerd, whether it's Marvel or DC. He even reads comic book just for pleasure and not just for business.
That's true. Ryan, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've liked most of the stuff that James Gunn has at least had his hands in. Like he wrote the screenplay for the remake of Dawn of the Dead, which I haven't seen in a while, but I remember enjoying. He made a movie called Slither, which I loved.
It's amazing.
So James Gunn has a pretty good standard of quality, and he took the Guardians of the Galaxy, like Z-list comic book.
They're more like D-list comic. They're like the D-listers.
And he turned them into like superstars. So
yeah,
if anyone can turn this around, it's him. Now, July is 4 months away. They've had some time to make this work. And if this fails, then it's pretty much the all or nothing situation. It's Schrodinger's cat. Either the cat's going to be alive or it's going to be dead. And we will not know until July.
Yeah. And I wish you, James, we wish you the best. Okay, James, we wish you the best. We hope we are going to blow our socks off in July. We hope this is going to be the level of the Dark Knight. We hope it is. When you say Summer of Superman, we actually hope this is going to be the Summer of Superman again.
And we're hoping that it's more of the summer of Top Gun Maverick. Because if you watch that first trailer with that Raymond of the guitar, that's so Top Gun. He's totally going to be doing taking a lot of elements from Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah. So Ryan, where can they find you?
YouTube at RyanCam20. Small Talk every Tuesday. Talking Silence. David Lynch Project. Best Picture month. I got a faith-based movie month coming up in April. I'm going to be reviewing a couple of Bible-based or Bible-adjacent films for the month of Easter, and of course myself, Jacob Collins, Matt Wyatt, and Kyle from Flet's Pop Culture 13. We're going to be reviewing all the mainline Superman theatrically released films, one a month leading up to James Gunn's Superman, and like I mentioned, the review for Superman 2, the Richard Lester version, will be dropping this coming Thursday, so stay tuned for that.
All right. Matt, where can I find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Matt Wyatt 92 on my YouTube channel. I'm like 5 subscribers away from reaching 300, and my goal is to reach 500 subscribers. I put up my recent review, the Netflix film called The Electric State, another review I did with the Disney Plus Marvel show, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and my spoiler review for the 4th episode of Daredevil Born Again, which it's probably the episode 5 and 6 have already dropped on Disney Plus by now. By the time this video comes out, I already put up my spoiler review for episode 5 and 6 of Daredevil Born Again.
Okay. All right. And I got some stuff coming up on the channel that I'm excited for. We do have something coming next week on April 1st that we're going to probably try to shoot over the weekend. I think we're going to try to get over the weekend because Tuesday's April 1st. We got something dropping on April Fool's Day. That's all we're going to say. It's going to be a fun video. I don't know what I'm reviewing this week yet. I might try to do Sonic 3 or Gladiator 2 yet. Have not done those yet, but actually, you know what? No, I know what I'm going to do. It's Captain America Civil War will be dropped this Friday on my review, and I'll be done with my road to Captain America. And then, of course, I'll try to get to Gladiator 2 and Sonic later. And, of course, I do Batman Terry's and then talking songs with these guys and talking and small talk. And if you can, give these guys like and subscribe. Thank you both for joining me on this crazy adventure. And I'm so glad that you were able to just stop spewing our bullshit for like a couple of hours, and just hearing us out. And, before we go, I just want to say thank you all so much. And if you have any issues with us or if you think that we're wrong, well, please tell us in the comments so that way we can tell you how wrong you are. Thank you both so much. And like as always,
Sharpton for president, y'all. I'm outie.
Jesse Jackson for VP.
That's right. You heard us right. Thank you both. Take care, guys.